Hello. Well, it certainly has been a while. Welcome to Fiddler's Green, podcast number 48. The first one in a really long time. I think I did the last one, almost 3 weeks ago, to be quite honest. The podcast is supposed to be every other week. But people ask me for these podcasts, and I do genuinely like putting them on. But the problem is I just people don't understand that being able to do podcasts in my life is a function of certain conditions. And one of the conditions is not being sort of the primary caretaker of my young child. So for the last month or so, my wife has been really sick with a variety of different illnesses. I think she had some kind of big immuno hit early on in her school. And since then, I've been unable to schedule these things at any appropriate time. And then in the last week or so, I've been on vacation. So I just feel like I've been away from the internet for ages at this stage. It almost feels like I'm coming back to some strange habit or whatever, or strange practice of actually podcasting. I mean, it's odd in a lot of ways because I think everyone thought that 2024 would be a really rambunctious year. People remember 2020. People remember 2016. These were years of just absolute craziness politically. But 2024 is sort of one of the sleepiest, strangest years of politics that I've ever seen. Almost nothing is kind of happening. I mean, we do have the standard stuff. I mean, Trump is continuing to get indicted at all sorts of levels. Everyone knows that it's going to be a rematch at the national scale between Trump and Biden. And I think most people deeply suspect that only one conclusion will be allowed by the deep state, which is going to be another Biden victory. And no one really knows how to react to this. There's a variety of things that I think people want to have. People want to experience the feeling of 2016 again. People want to feel the energy and the excitement. They want to have a direction. But people try to ramp things up, and it doesn't really work the same way. I mean, it isn't really, I have a talk prepared of sorts, right? But mostly it's going to just be reacting to the circumstances. And this is the stereotype of all Fiddler's Green podcasts. What's the first thing Dave does on any one of his podcasts? Oh, I lament the death of discourse. Well, I mean, kind of. I mean, it's a discourse channel. The channel was founded on discourse, and I have to comment about its absence at some level. I mean, I would like to say, as somebody who promotes anti-politics, that this is the way out, that we're finally crossed the threshold of being infatuated with politics. But people seem to be, 2024 is just like a year of doom scrolling. All the news events are doom scrolling. Like, you see the news event, it's always horrible. It's always the worst thing possible. And even if it happens to the other person, even if it's something horrible that happens to the Democratic Party, all it is sort of indicative of things going down the tubes, slowly or more quickly. The last article I wrote on my Substack when I was on vacation, I gave myself permission to write an article largely about Warhammer 40,000. But the last article I wrote was just my reaction to watching the Baltimore bridge collapse. And the Baltimore bridge collapse is like every modern event that happens. In 2020, it was novel. We're entering a new era. We've got to change our thinking. In 2016, more to the point, things were getting nuts. 2016 was the year that things initially kind of began to seem like they were really becoming unraveled. But it was new, and there was a new political force on the scene. And at that point, it wasn't so clear exactly how internet discourse worked. And this is what I'm going to kind of be talking about for the most part in this podcast. If you guys aren't too concerned with anything else, maybe I should have made this an Ask Me Anything podcast like I did in my last one. I don't want to have Ask Me Anything podcasts because I feel that that's sort of a bad habit to get into. And if I read the news and I do Ask Me Anythings, I think that's not really my brand. My brand is to kind of share what I'm thinking about when I look out into the world. And even if that has some common notes with all the other things I've been saying, I want it to be kind of an original lecture and an original sort of, like I used to do with teaching, where you come to a bunch of lecture notes and you spit the lecture into the screen, and then you have a new live video of sorts. And that's sort of the idea of the Fiddler's Green podcast. It's not supposed to be a video essay, because video essays don't do very well. But this is essentially how I used to do my video essays. I used to do my video essays with just setting up a camera, or not really a camera, a microphone, and then just talking extemporaneously about something that's going on in the news. And then kind of cutting it up and making it into a full-length video. Of course, there's no purpose in cutting the videos up anymore, because the live streams do better than the edited videos in the algorithm. So all of that time taken to edit a video like this is wasted time. Not to mention, the fact that you can get some money from doing live streams anyway, and people, well, I shouldn't say people, the algorithm prefers them. But the problem of living in the year of the doom scroll, 2024, is that originally when I made my video essays, there were events, and even when we talked about the online space, it felt like they were discrete events in the space. Not like, okay, like, of course, there's what's ever going on Twitter. I can open up my copy of the New Right post, which I recommend everyone subscribe to if you want to keep up to date with the discourse. I can follow along with the New Right post and see what people are talking about, what new publications have come out. But it's not like there is an event that we're all collectively reacting to, like Brexit, or like the emergence of the alt-right in 2016, or the Trump election, or any of that stuff. It's more or less kind of more of the same. I mean, the first thing that actually, maybe I should switch to the PowerPoint. People will notice here that I'm significantly darker than I usually am. This is because the wife, while I was away, took my lighting and used it for her own Magic the Gathering play along channel, which you guys should all subscribe to, the Tilting Turtle. Sometimes I appear there and play along with her, but I didn't have time to really set it back up, and I didn't want to be bothered. So right now you're seeing me in stark relief. It's mood lighting, right? But anyway, let's get to the presentation mode. The first thing, the long awaited vibe shift has been going on for most of 2024. And it's kind of funny because everyone, I think in 2023, people were kind of saying that this is on the horizon. And we were kind of looking forward to the vibe shift, hopefully, right? we're looking towards the vibe shift, like this would somehow deliver us back into the spirit of 2016. And indeed, I think what's happened is what is the vibe shift? Well, the vibe shift is pretty obvious. It's people slowly realizing that it's just not a cool thing to be a progressive in 2024. The Jon Stewart mode of being that characterized most of the millennial generation, it's just not working for very many more people. This is sort of weird. I feel like I'm getting backlit by this notepad. It's not working for very many people anymore. And so as people are kind of looking for something different, there's a lot of dissatisfaction. But you can see it in things like the collapse of some of the streamers, like Hassan. I can't really believe that Hassan, Cenk Uyghur's son, is sort of the king of BreadTube streaming, but indeed he is, just by the numbers. But his numbers have been collapsing. Potentially because the algorithm doesn't want to support political content in 2024, but also because just the promises and procedure of being a leftist are more and more meaningless at this stage. It's kind of an embarrassing thing to be on the left in 2024. It doesn't feel good. It's not epic. There are problems. We can redescribe problems, but it doesn't really lead to anything that's interesting. And okay, well, are people coming to the right? Well, not really either. the right has the perennial problem of being out of power almost continuously. There's no reason to go to the right. In 2016, there was an understanding that at some level, the vibe shift or the new feeling would result in some kind of reaction from the government or some kind of change or some kind of thing that could be accomplished in terms of organizing a real world movement at the mass level. But no one's under any illusion of that after 2020. No one's under any illusion that people are going to get aroused out of their complacency by some kind of disaster, because we've already experienced all the disasters. We've already experienced all the inflation. It's over in that regard. One thing I did notice, and this is something that I thought was a little interesting. It's kind of cringe. The most noticeable thing that happened in the last 2 weeks was something, and this is what I guess I'm kind of trying to figure out myself, is what, and I guess we're talking through it right now. We're talking through the great femoid or foid backlash of 2024. Somehow inexplicably, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, every single one of the standard people, the standard right-wing women in the online dissident right space on Twitter became completely incensed with the existence of bad actors on the right wing. And this is interesting because they've always been there. So moving forward, I mean, if you want to talk about the people who are picking up on sort of the decline of BreadTube and the decline of the political streamers, well, those people have fallen apart in 2023, and Vosh has fallen apart in 2023 too. I think it's always hilarious to see kind of the decline of these people, especially in Vosh's case, since I can't believe that it might have in fact been the horrible porn habits that killed him. You know, this is what actually makes the horrible administration of Twitter by Elon Musk so egregious, is that now the bots are literally sending people like pornography pictures. And that's always the most horrible thing, because one of the great advantages of completely quitting the coon brain lifestyle of my old atheist years is I have absolutely no fear that anything scandalous could be discovered on my computer hard drive, let alone in my tax folder. But now with these porn bots, like, there's a scandalous picture that's showing up in my mentions, like just directed at me, like I could accidentally open it at work. But I'm getting. This is going to be kind of a weird live stream tonight because I'm not as focused as I usually am, I guess. You have to forgive me because I'm also pretty jet lagged. I've been on the West Coast for the last 2 weeks, so we'll keep on rolling with the punches. The interesting thing is, what's picked up the slack from the political streamers, from what I could tell, was a really weird emergence of the manosphere or the red pill communities. And I think this is what kicked it off, because the first thing I remember in 2023 is seeing the emergence of the Whatever podcast, which again, I don't think it billed itself as such, but it essentially was a red pill podcast. It's a guy basically and his friends just inviting on the most brain dead OnlyFans whores onto his show and then making them look like idiots over the course of 2 hours, and then kind of hopping on the bandwagon after the popularity erupted. Sort of mainstream conservatives would come on this channel and lecture these girls about their horrible, thoughty ways. And this was complemented by the rise of the two most 2023 personalities, which were Pearl Davis, or just Pearly Things as she's known online, and Andrew Tate. And I think this is probably what kicked off the great Foyd reaction in 2024. I don't know about anyone else. Like, was anyone else taking these people seriously? I certainly wasn't. They're basically, essentially, they're lower IQ versions of all the same ideas that were in circulation in 2016, 2017. I mean, Pearly Things is a Karen Strawn with no ability to write and half of the IQ. And a complete inability to manage her own optics, but this just takes off. And Andrew Tate, I mean, it's like it's a rehash of Rouge, right? It's that he's basically the same guy. I mean, like, except I guess with a lack of self-awareness. Is that it? Like, it's self-improvement sold to you by a bodybuilder who has a Bugatti or claims to, and is selling you all of these little self-help regimens on short videos. I mean, this has already been done. And I don't know really what to compare the Whatever podcast to, but it's essentially like the same kind of doom scrolling feeling you have throughout all 2024. Just the pointlessness of it all. And, people, I've seen complaints as 2023 went on. I heard women complain about this. And sure, like, I got it, but then again, I didn't, because they're complaining about these people. They're complaining about, I assume what's happening is that as these characters like Andrew Tate and Just Pearly Things and the Whatever podcast get more popular, like a whole huge barrage of new guys with no filter come onto the scene. And then you have some kind of reaction that hits many women, but they'll complain endlessly about Pearl Davis. Now, I blocked Pearl Davis like 6 to 8 months ago, and I muted Andrew Tate. Well, I don't think Andrew Tate's even on Twitter. And no, I after the first hour of watching the Whatever podcast, I kind of got the thing, and I never watched it again, even when Michael Knowles was on. I mean, I got over it, and I never looked back. And these things were just not elements of my life anymore. But somehow, just this last month, every single woman completely had enough and decided to lay down the law in terms of men and their role in the movement and what we needed to do to keep women on board. And at the center of it all, there was a Twitter account that I've known for a long time and actually have been a fan of. I will say unironically that I am a fan of this account, Radfem Hitler, or as she's known by her acronym, RFH, Radfem Hitler. I mean, and just by the fact that she goes by RFH as opposed to Radfem Hitler, makes her, in my own mind, and how she tweets, right? She's a very equivalent figure to how she tweets to Zero H.P. Lovecraft. Zero H.P. Lovecraft is better known in our circles as a writer. He writes fiction. He writes expository essays, quite good ones, by the way. The best essay I've read in the last 4 months has been his Zendaya and the Art of Multi-Universe Maintenance, which was just a seminal essay. I was able to, branch off multiple different ideas from that one. But this time, but I should say, he's also known on Twitter as being a little bit of a shitposter and kind of a performative misogynist, right? And so here comes Radfem Hitler. Obviously, I mean, maybe it's not immediately apparent that she's a girl in real life. And I don't just mean that as the ironic acronym, but actually female. There's actually a female behind this account, although that wasn't necessarily apparent to begin with. A right-wing woman, or a person that has, I mean, broadly someone who understands right-wing ideas and who's read Nick Land and who's not some kind of clueless shitlib, coming on and just sort of dumping a heavy dose of performative misandry. So it's all the same kind of snarky comebacks, arguing the opposite end of the discourse that calls all women mid, kind of disparagingly describing incels and other undesirables they don't like that are men, and then building it into a broader theory about how men need to improve themselves. Now you could think, oh, well, this is just what all feminists do. Like, this is what else is new? This is my shitlib aunt, right? This is, but all right, but the charm, and I'm using that word with a certain amount of salt, the charm of Radfem Hitler was that it wasn't in the pearl clutchy way. Somehow the way that she spoke in her own voice was not in that kind of, and I know this mode very, very well, because all my relatives, she's not in that kind of boomer drama kid millennial woman, the Taylor Lawrences of the world, even the Chaya Radchicks, right? Who their entire thing is like, oh my God, look at this, I'm so horrible, oh woe is me, blah 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 blah. I mean, Radfem Hitler, the kind of charm was that. She punched back, and she punched back hard. So, she would double down on outright misandry. She would just use horrible, aggressive terms to describe her opponents. When people talked about the birth rate decline and the eventual family collapse, she kind of, and I remember this very distinctly, she's like, oh yeah, the human race should just die because I'm not going along with this. Sort of a catty femme version of Horace Lupercal's let the galaxy burn, let the galaxy burn, but like not in a mean way, just because I'm not putting it up with anymore. I've had enough. So let the galaxy burn. The kind of femme version of the Warhammer deal. So, I mean, but this was kind of, I don't want to say it's charming, but it was at least refreshing to get kind of the unfiltered female point of view on kind of take it in at the same time, see it as kind of a pushback. And it's kind of part of the ecosystem of the right. But oddly enough, this person gained an enormous amount of popularity among other right-wing women, and kind of aligned them behind this narrative that the misogyny in the right was getting out of control. And I'm not talking just about random anons. I'm talking about obviously Alex Kashuda, who went on another sort of Twitter rant about how this was a problem and about how women were getting the ick from the right-wing sphere on Twitter. The blonde in the belly of the beast and a variety, and Helen Roy too. And it's like every single one kind of aligned on this prognosis for functionally no reason, because they're collectively counter signaling and making this enormous noise. And at the same time, I'm looking around and asking myself, oh, well, what's changed? What's happened? And so I guess this kind of brings me to the Alex Kashuda Radfem Hitler interview, which I guess I'm using as a kickoff point for this conversation or this extended lecture. So I was just not really going to touch on this too much because it's kind of a weird internet drama, but it was interesting to finally get a chance to hear Radfem Hitler talk in person. And I think so she went on Alex Kashuda's show, which is actually perfect because Alex Kashuda had kind of gotten a lot of backlash from doubling down on the RFH narrative about men being terrible, at least in the right wing. And for those of you who are not familiar, Alex is probably one of the best interview shows. She does a podcast called The Garden of Earthly Delights, and it's one of the best interview shows on the right wing. It has everybody on, and it's expanded the discourse in innumerable ways. And, I guess I probably would put like the Lotus Eaters is more like a news show, but I think a close second would be perhaps Jay Burden's show, which is kind of like, I want to say like the farm leagues of Alex Kashuda, but Jay Burden goes in and interviews more obscure people, whereas I think Alex is more targeted at sort of the people who are at the level of people, not necessarily at mainstream journalist level, but just below that on the surface of the blogosphere, on WordPress. And this is how I discovered people like, not Zero HP Lovecraft, but like Indian Bronson and Billy Bragg and all these other people, or as to say, Bennett, I had discovered him on Alex's show as well, and a variety of other people that are kind of broadly comprise the dissident right on Twitter. And so, okay, we're finally going to see the real Radfem Hitler in action. And, I turned on this podcast expecting to kind of get, I don't exactly know what I was expecting. I think I was expecting some kind of like fire-breathing, man-hating feminist that happened to be really, really well read on Nick Land, and then was kind of like not exactly mentally stable, but still very lucid. But that's not at all what happened. In fact, it was kind of bizarre. The entire podcast, and I hate spoiler alert, guys. Spoiler alert. The thing came out today behind a paywall. So the whole thing was Radfem Hitler in real life is just a very average woman. Obviously, she comes from a background. She had a horrible experience with her marriage. She was from a right-wing background, had a horrible experience with a first marriage, which is not surprising. I kind of figured that, and I kind of some other people had told me the background story that she had been horribly beaten. Sort of like a Hillary. Maybe this is another thing that might have happened. Might have been driving this was the whole Stephen Crowder versus Hillary Crowder divorce drama, right? And obviously she had a very horrible first marriage, and this led to some abuse, and I more or less figured I'd hear about that. But then what the rest of the interview was just her explaining describing the problem and talking about how horrible it was that people were being hypocrites. And her role was to call out hypocrisy. That's what her whole role was on the platform of Twitter, was to be a firebrand to the service of calling out hypocrisy. Because she said, I was looking at all of these right-wing accounts, being a right-winger myself, and I discovered a horrible amount of misogyny. And at some point, she describes a group chat. I can't remember who brings this up, right? A group chat where incels were planning a rape caravan. A rape caravan was being planned in the right wing. And this is what levels of dehumanization? Have we lost all ability to have discourse? Have we lost any ability to see ourselves as human, or really to discuss the problem rationally? And this level of hypocrisy, when we should be talking about how we can better serve men and women's interests together. And Radfem Hitler says, well, after that amount of dehumanization, I knew that they really weren't on my side, and we needed to be doing something radically different. And of course, Alex is a great interviewer, and more or less the rest of the 60 minutes is spent just redescribing the problem of men failing in society, essentially men having a lack of motivation. Because unsurprisingly, when we've reconfigured all of the parameters to prioritize women and to denigrate men for the things they like, surprise, surprise, men aren't particularly motivated to be high earners and be good mates for men. And, so it's more or less the same talk that any right-wing woman would have given if they were on the Alex Kashida show. I could see Helen Roy saying the exact same thing. I could see Louis Perry saying the exact same thing as Radfem Hitler. And I was kind of disappointed because I kind of started second guessing myself. Like, is this the same person? Is there some other Radfem Hitler? Did I just completely misremember this person's personality online as a firebrand? Because everything I'm hearing is just, it could be like a Jonathan Haidt, Jordan Peterson lecture. And what are we going to do about those men? And how are we going to get them remotivated and all this stuff? And, and of course, the typical hand wringing about the uselessness of dehumanizing rhetoric that ramps up online, which I assume is being brought to these women by a bunch of anonymous accounts. I mean, I certainly don't remember organizing a rape caravan, and I certainly don't think anyone else was either. And to be quite honest, it sounds a little bit like a joke. And, so we're nearing the last part of the show. And what Alex's last question is. But fans of the show, fans of Alex Kashida, will always know what Alex's last question of the show is. And the last question show is, you have a subversive author that you would want to recommend to the audience to see. What is your subversive author for the audience? And I'm sitting here kind of thinking to myself, I really am not getting my money's worth for the radical firebrand. But if this if this tart, I'm sorry, but I was a little bit frustrated. This tart goes through the entire interview, acting like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, acting like she's just the the Ladies' Home Journal advice on how to get your son in shape, Jordan Peterson, but with 2X chromosomes. If she goes through the entire 55-minute interview, not touching on a single bit of her online radicalism, and if her last question, if when Alex inevitably asks her, what book do you recommend, if she drops either Andrea Dworkin or Valerie Solanas, I'm leaving. And guess what? Alex asked her the question, what are the 2 recommendations she has? She has, Andrea Dworkin and Valerie Solanas. Oh, perfect. Oh, great. Yes, of course. That is exactly what I would expect after a 2-hour lecture on how radicalism and dehumanization is destroying the discourse. And I want to kind of not be pearl clutchy myself, and I'll explain these 2 authors. I think these are 2 authors that come in for a lot of maligning. They come from. This is the thing you have to be aware of if you come from a conservative circle, is that you get sort of like scared away from authors that have interesting things to say, and so for instance, like Hegel's a big boogeyman in conservative circles, and although he has many flaws, and most bad modern ideas descend from Hegel, he's a very valuable author to learn because he has some very valuable kernel of truth. And the same thing is true for Andrea Dworkin and for a much lesser extent, Valerie Solanas. Now, for those people who don't know these 2 authors, Valerie Solanas, well, let me do Andrea Dworkin first. Andrea Dworkin was a seminal figure in second wave feminism. She was, and both these women actually have the exact same background. Both Valerie Solanas and Andrea Dworkin came from left-wing backgrounds. They were both, I believe, daughters of communists or anarchists, and were horrifically abused by men. I think one by her father, one by her husband. And they entered into the second wave feminist movement with deep pathological hatred towards men. Now, Andrea Dworkin was very, very famous for doing scathing criticisms of the role of the women throughout history, going so far as to say that all heterosexual sex is rape, all relationships between men and women is one of oppressor and oppressed. This is essentially the Marxist dialectic, but translated into sex. And you can find any number of horrific statements she uses to describe essentially every single man as a literal rapist if they engage in heterosexual sex. Now, Andrea Dworkin, again, she was a deeply... that's the scare quotes you get from the conservative circle. Now, why should you consider Andrea Dworkin? Well, despite the fact that she had these radical positions, she did have a good deal of insight into how women thought. And one of the seminal works that she wrote that I haven't actually read, but I've read excerpts of it, and it seemed like it was fairly insightful, was a book called Right-Wing Women, which viewed right-wing ideas through the lens of the women who, like Phyllis Schlafly. I never know how to pronounce that name. You know, the classic anti-feminists of the 70s and 80s. And what most people don't know is that Andrea Dworkin actually did have a very, very good personal relationship with a number of highly conservative, religious conservatives during her time. And she was she felt perfectly comfortable with them. And none of sort of the vicious radicalism was present. But Andrea Dworkin, I shouldn't make her sound too normal, because this was a deeply, deeply disturbed individual. Despite her keen insight, in parts, this woman had horrible delusions that she was being pursued by gangs of rapists. And up to her death in 2006 or 2005, she was claiming that she had, essentially, she was imagining what must have been completely fictitious accounts of her being kidnapped by these rape gangs. This was something like a 60-year-old woman, and she had horrible health problems. This was obviously a delusional fabrication. This woman had deep psychological problems, and those psychological problems were very much manifested in her desire to, for lack of a better word, dehumanize all men. Valerie Solanas is actually more of the same. Valerie Solanas was a radical feminist, again, from the 70s, worked with Andy Warhol, and wrote the Scum Manifesto. The Scum Manifesto is essentially a genocidal male eliminist manifesto about how all men should be essentially castrated, right? And this is, I mean, I feel like this has been parodied and reinserted in feminist literature so many times it's almost a cliche. It's kind of an interesting work of performance art. But the problem is that it once more, Valerie Slut was a deeply disturbed individual, and unless you think that this desire for violence was entirely hypothetical, she attempted to assassinate Andy Warhol and almost killed him before kind of emerging from jail and essentially trying to promote her Scum Manifesto as a literal plan to rise up a revolution to kill all men. Until she eventually died of pneumonia on the streets of San Francisco. And this was an unwell person, and you know, this is an unwell person, and somebody who obviously whose unwellness, whose desire to translate their mental illness into violence was not hypothetical. She literally almost killed. I mean, I don't like Andy Warhol very much as an artist, but what most would consider the most formative artist of their time. And it was over some kind of weird delusion, again, kind of like this delusional perception that he was trying to steal her art. Which, you know, again, you know, people reviewed this grievance and it's completely fabricated. And so, like, you know, I'm hearing this, I'm like, okay, so for all this time, I'm supposed to imagine that what created the great femoid backlash of 2024. I guess my original theory was people not being able to handle backlash, right? Or maybe it was Radfem Hitler just feeding it back, right? It was Radfem Hitler feeding it back. Okay, but and so I hear on this podcast that, oh, well, we just don't understand. We don't understand why anyone would use hyperbolic misogyny to make an artistic point. But you do understand why people use hyperbolic language to make a political point. I mean, oh gee, Alex, I'm so distressed at the existence of hyperbolic language and performative misogyny and people going overboard and, you know, maybe even doing things dangerous. They're organizing rape caravans. Okay, what's your recommendation? The Scum Manifesto. The Scum Manifesto will get us back online. And the problem with all of this is it's. I'm kind of sitting there after this, and it's a fine podcast. I mean, any single sentence. I don't think people should not read the Scum Manifesto. It is, you know, it's not how feminists usually defend it, like it's performance art. Valerie Slut didn't really believe this. Yes, she did believe this. She was unhinged. She was delusional, but she very much was a narcissist and someone who suffered from borderline personality disorder, in addition to the variety of other mental illnesses that she acquired by being the victim of continuous years of abuse. And she absolutely believed this delusion. So, I mean, you can appreciate it for the art that it is. And I've heard it said that morality should have no place in an art house. And you know, and by the same token, I appreciate many of the more egregious statements by Zero H.P. Lovecraft and Bronze Age Pervert. But the problem is there is no coherent. I listened to this hour podcast. I've read Alex's thread several times over. I've read the similar objections written by Helen Roy. There's no coherent idea here that's at all actionable. It's a set of grievances that have no. They really have no coherency and no substance. And I'm supposed to appreciate them as grievances. I'm supposed to hear them as grievances, but they can't be politically acted on. We can't get rid of performative misogyny at obviously. And does Radfem Hitler even ask for that? I mean, Walsh is recommending, like, what is it? The Scum Manifesto is awesome, but Bronze Age mindset's a step too far. and Andrea Dworkin's pans about how all heterosexual sex is rape and how all heterosexual men are scum. That's literature. But zero HP Lovecraft telling women that they need to lose 20 pounds online is, that's dangerous. That's what's going to give women the ick online. This is, it was a brilliant, and I can't express how much respect I have for Alex Kashuda, and I do even respect Radfem Hitler's art, so to speak, as a Twitter performance artist, in very much the same way that I respect Valerie Solanas' art I do not think that Radfem Hitler is psychotically delusional like Valerie Solanas, but I understand her craft to be in the same spirit. There's no actionable objection to this. This is pure emotion. And it's pure emotion reacting to a particular mode in social media. After you've done this for as long as I have, right now, pretty much 8 years, you kind of get an understanding of how the internet works. You kind of understand what exactly is going on, what emotions are circulating. The emotion that's circulating in the Radfem, in the great femoid backlash of 24 is an emotion of being disempowered and desiring a certain state of affairs that can't be produced in essentially a public environment. Alex Kashuda was right when she said this. She said, and this is her words, where she was very much, I don't say she was following Radfem Hitler and doing this, but this was her kind of statement that came out 2 weeks ago. She correctly stated that if you give women the ick, they'll go away. They're gonna leave this sphere, and that'll be an utter detriment to the right wing. Well, there's a few things here. I don't think you actually. I think that the problem here is women want us to process this in a way that it's not possible to. Alex Kashuda is not talking about zero HP Lovecraft or delicious tacos or Indian Bronson or any of the edgelords that she has had on her podcast. She has, or Bronze Age pervert. She's had great relations with all of them. I don't know if she's actually interviewed Bronze Age pervert, but she certainly discussed his stuff on her show. She's not talking about any of those individuals. What people are talking about are all of the anons that see the performative misogyny and then repeat the performative misogyny without the irony and minus 30 IQ points. And that's how you get creeps. That's how you get people, and I don't doubt that there actually were a bunch of incels plotting a rape caravan that Alex Kashuda came across in some Discord chat or whatever, or I can't remember, was it Radfem Hitler? I don't doubt that happened, but what we're seeing and what you see in the Andrew Tate examples too, and what you see in sort of and all these people have very cringe audiences. It's essentially ideas, or it's a performance that's supposed to be done at a professional level. And it's being filtered down to people who are not cool, not smart, and not in command of their own capacities. And it comes off as creepy and weird. Okay, great. And I think that the understanding is that that's how it is. And I could tell that when Radfem Hitler or RFH was talking about Valerie Solanas and Andrea Dworkin, she came from a conservative background. She came from, I think, a military family. I couldn't quite tell in the interview, but a family that had no experience with sort of mainstream blue progressive society. And then she went right from that to an abusive relationship and then apparently a divorce. And then a Reemergence is kind of a shitposter hybrid between a right winger and a feminist. She presented Valerie Solanas and Andrea Dworkin as if these were relics. These were unknown artists. Nobody would have ever thought of trying to do Valerie Solanas. No one would ever thought of doing a variation on Andrea Dworkin. These are radical figures that no one ever reads. Radfem Hitler. It looks a little bit different if you grow up in an actual blue community, or you see where blue communities are this day and age. Because believe me, the spirit of Valerie Solanas and Andrea Dworkin is alive and well. They are heavily read by every single 105, 110 divorced mom in the Bay Area, and they're very much sympathized with, and they're very much copied, and variations are done upon them. And just like the people who you don't like, the 100 IQ misogynists trying to copy Bronze Age mindset while they plan their rape caravans, just like that's cringe and horribly icky to you. We've been living in the world that these part-time mom feminists have been creating for the last 20 years. This is part of a process. Every single idea that comes out at a popular level in the 20th century eventually finds its way down the IQ ladder to a lower IQ level, such that when people like, Zero HP Lovecraft or Bronze Age Pervert, the reason why performative misogyny is liberating. I mean, what do you think happened? I mean, does Radfem Hitler think that the order of events is right-wingers were mean, then, they planned the rape caravan, and then in reaction, Valerie Solanas and Andrea Dworkin wrote their radical novels of liberation? I mean, it's not crazy. I mean, Solanas and Dworkin were a reaction to male violence, but certainly not of the ideological kind that you're seeing online right now. No, what you're seeing essentially is you are reacting to a reaction to the very authors that you cite at a high level. You promote Andrea Dworkin, she gets taught, and then you get 105, 8 or 95 IQ, divorced soccer moms, working HR departments, making everyone's life a living hell, turning all of society into a stifling longhouse with very, very little opportunities to men. And we are in the situation we are right now, where men are completely demotivated and repeating the cycle again and again and again. Is this the process you want? I don't see a way out. Also, by counter-signaling misogyny, since no names are ever made, all we have is sort of like, okay, so the algorithm is promoting misogyny in 2024. Well, that's great. And it's kind of funny because, I have more or less been on the female side of these conversations. Certainly, the most notorious conversation that was happening this week was over one of the girls from the Whatever podcast. She went from being an OnlyFans, I don't know what you call them, content creator, thought, lady of the night. What euphemism are we using for OnlyFans employees? I can't keep track of it. But she went from being an OnlyFans sex worker to being a Christian and embracing, the chaste life. And of course, the conversation was it's a typical thing, right? Oh, she's just grifting. She's still hogging the spotlight. We can't possibly forgive this person. This is just, we need to actually shame slutty women. It's important that she suffers so that she is able to get there's something, we can have some kind of catharsis in this moment. And on the other side, there's like, oh, well, this whole incel thing is sort of low class. And reminds me of this other conversation that we've been having for some time about, that this is a in light of this most recent controversy about slut shaming. And I don't think it was necessarily in the wake of this one woman's decision to convert to Christianity in a somewhat convincing, somewhat unconvincing way simultaneously. There's been a large conversation recently about slut shaming and about promiscuous behavior generally. This is a thing I think people are. This periodically happens because what happens? Essentially, people become Puritans because they're reacting against the excesses of the sexual revolution, and And then people get tired of the Puritans, and then they want to push back. And I think, and they'll say something like, this article I came across was by Walt Bismarck. And for people who don't remember, Walt Bismarck was one of the OG alt-right people around Richard Spencer in 2016. He never did podcasts, but what he did was he would do Disney musical themes with the words taken out and replaced by basically he rewrote the lyrics so that they would tell a story that was conducive to the alt-right. So I think Be My Guest was replaced with IQ tests, and rewritten that way. And he rewrote, my favorite one was the Bells of Notre Dame became the National Review. And it was the story about how paleoconservatism was destroyed and revivified in very much the same way that Quasimodo was saved from Frollo by the priest at that point in the Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? And it was a completely unserious channel. And I see this person popping back up, throwing down under the slutty woman debate. What can we do about slutty women? Or what should we be shaming people or not shaming people? And believe it or not, this article is not about whether we should shame slutty women. It's kind of deceptive this way. Walt Bismarck is 100% defending men who sleep around and women only incidentally. And it's similar to other red pill arguments that I was raging against earlier this year before I discovered that the entire thing is completely futile. I really should say earlier in 2023. The argument, essentially the argument goes something like this. Trads are uncool, and we don't really understand how power works. Powerful men will always sleep around, and they'll have mistresses that you'll call sluts, but at the same time, there are valued mistresses, and they keep us valuable, high-priced men happy and able to do the elite kind of activities that you need us to do. And I've read about 3 articles. I've never read a Walt Bismarck article until this year. Before, essentially a month ago, I thought he was just the guy who did cringy Disney parodies and then disappeared when everyone disappeared from the alt-right in 2017. Now he's coming back and telling me that I'm an old fuddy-duddy because I think people should have sexual standards of any variety, or I think that they should apply universally. And this is the argument goes, well, Las Vegas used to be cool. Las Vegas used to be a place you would go and it would be Sin City and you do your sinning there. And that was part of a healthy ecosystem. There was, I don't know, was this Thomas Aquinas? I feel like it wasn't, but there was some Catholic thinker who once said that prostitution is like it's like a castle latrine. It's absolutely filthy, but it's necessary. Otherwise, the entire house would start to stink. It's part of this balanced ecosystem. Society needs a pressure release valve, and furthermore, the thing is always, you need us to be in this position. The response to all of this is it's pretty. I said that when I encountered this argument from various red pill people. I think Red Hawk and I were going at it about a year ago and more or less had the same conversation. It's a pretty simple distinction here that you encounter with this stuff. You are absolutely right that very, very powerful men have always had mistresses on the side. Some have not, I should say. Not all powerful men have universally been licentious and sexually incontinent. I think in the New Right post, the Deadly New Right pointed out that Paul Newman was an elite man who had won women his entire life. And I was not a known philanderer, although I can't vouch for the details of his life. I'm only kind of repeating this secondhand. There are examples of sexually continent men who have been very, very powerful in their time. not to mention many popes or people who are under vows of celibacy. So it's not impossible, but I fully acknowledge that. And I feel like I'm repeating myself here. I fully acknowledge that if you're powerful, you'll be able to have mistresses. And I'm certainly not going to go to war to stop you. I'm not going to plunge my society into chaos so that I can hold up some standard of monogamy that's almost impossible to enforce. I'm certainly not going to peek into your bedroom at night to make sure that the woman you're sleeping with is your wife. That's always been the case. It's a little different though, and this is what these guys always leave out. It's a little bit different if it's public. The reason why it's different and they'll always say this. All the sort of red pill right-wing pickup artists will always say, oh, well, most people, most dads, most patriarchs, they need to have loving monogamy. Most women need to be in monogamous relationships. Most women need to be in monogamous relationships. And, if you're like an overweight housewife, you should be happy in monogamy. If you're a wage cuck dad, and I'm a wage cuck myself, you need to be happy in monogamy. And, I completely agree. I am quite happy in monogamy. Thank you very much. But us elevated people, we need to be able to be free from the rules. The original system where Charlemagne and the aristocrats got to cheat was dependent absolutely on the idea that this was private. Once you go around and go to all of your patriarchal supporters, all of your middle class supporters, all of the people who are doing the hard work and following the rules, and you march around and say, I am the superior man, I have a mistress, please endorse the fact that I am cheating and breaking the rules. And not only am I cheating and breaking the rules with impunity in a way that you can't stop me, the fact that I am cheating and breaking the rules means that I'm a superior man than you. I'm more intelligent. I'm more talented. I don't have to follow the rules because I'm superior. Look, I have multiple women I have on the side. I'm not following the rules, and that means I'm better than you. If you do that, which is essentially what this article and every other article does, the deal is over. Men will fight against you if you do that to them. You're literally spiritually cucking them in front of them. You're not literally cucking them. How can I get literal? But I mean, I could say literally spiritually cucking them, but that sounds kind of odd. But you are literally putting them in the position of the cuckold in front of all of their friends and family. When you do that publicly, when you announce the fact that not only are you breaking the rules, but just by merely breaking the rules, you are this pure person. Hey guys, and not only that, to all the young men out there, to all the young men who are listening to me while I'm publicly giving this lecture, let me tell you that ordinarily, if you're a dumb average person, you have to follow the rules. But if you're a cool guy like me who's superior, you can break all of the rules and sleep with whoever you want to. And the only thing that designates you as a superior man who gets to break the rules is breaking the rules. I mean, you don't have to win a war or get a Nobel Prize or write a wonderful novel. I'm sure as hell Walt Bismarck didn't. He did Disney movies that had redubbed lyrics in them. That was his main contribution. The sum total of his contribution compared to mine is like a thimble. And it was immediately erased because first of all, I think he deleted it because him and everyone else in the alt-right just ran away. And so it had zero temporal staying power. And then in addition to that, the ideology is totally incoherent. This makes you a superior man. It's not because I don't owe you protection. I don't acknowledge you as an artistic master. And yet you're using the fact that you're breaking the rules as a way to shame me. And that's exactly what you're doing when you publicize this. When you make it public, you're forcing the issue and forcing everyone that you would ordinarily need to support you into a war against you. Why would anybody acknowledge this guy as some kind of thought leader if by being their thought leader, he is essentially telling them that they're all worthless people who are less valuable than any other guy who's breaking the rules that they've sacrificed to follow? Especially since half of the people who he's telling this to have more accomplishments under their belt than he does. I see this pattern all the time. I mean, and the thing is, look, oh, wow, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if we could go back to the Las Vegas of 1963? And this is the Las Vegas that everyone remembers of 1963. This is the Rat Pack. It's Errol Flynn, Frank Sinatra. Is it Nat King Cole? I think it was. And I had a variety of other people. I can't quite keep all of the names in London. They were highly associated with John F. Kennedy. These were a series of entertainers that would essentially play shows in Las Vegas when Las Vegas was still trying to get into itself. And this was a symbol of the original Las Vegas, the original Sin City that was very much licentious, very much breaking the rules. I can't say that all these men had mistresses, but that was always kind of the subtle implication. And certainly Kennedy, who was highly associated with this crowd, did have mistresses, right? And this is where you get the expression, what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. And this is also where you get the impression when people say, I'm going to Vegas. And then I remember first going to Vegas the first time. I'm going to Vegas. Oh my God, this is gonna be so great. You walk into the casino and then there's just lines. I mean, you expect like there's gonna be like snazzy people in suits with like handkerchiefs, playing cards, living it up, having cocktails with some incredibly bodacious woman. You get to the real Vegas, you get into the hotel and there's just lines of boomers as far as the eye can see, just cranking penny slots and drinking some horrible like Long Island iced tea that is overpriced and absolutely has zero class to it. And that's Las Vegas as it exists. There was a Las Vegas of glamour. There was I don't want sin to be glamorous. I guess we're idolizing it now. But this was the age of aristocracy. The people who broke these rules broke them in a certain place. They broke them in a certain way, and they broke the rules in a way that did not disrupt the operation of the rest of their society. John F. Kennedy didn't go up and say, "My fellow Americans, I have just slept with another woman who is not my wife, and I want you all to know that this is simply an indication that I am a superior man." And that was not broadcast to the nation. That was not broad. There was an understanding that the aristocratic impulse would mean that these men would be defenders of the nuclear family, even if they were granted some privileges to break the rules that were bestowed upon them due to their amount of power that they possessed. And is there any understanding of this? I mean, what happened? Well, I mean, there is, but I kind of wonder what all these red pillars think happened, and it's the exact same thing that happened to Alex Kashuta and Radfem Hitler, where we went from performative misogyny by professionals, by writers that did it in a funny way, to suddenly being surrounded by an ocean of creeps that were repeating lines they had heard on a podcast and somehow planning an incel revolution despite being completely undesirable themselves. Aristocracy depends on privacy. And what eventually killed the privacy? What eventually killed the privacy of the upper class, being sluts, men or women, was mass media, was feminism. Eventually, the women who were being cheated on by these types of men, by the Don Draper types, got angry and all became signed on to second wave feminism. eventually, mass media caught wind of what was going on and broadcast the sexual revolution not as something just for an adventurous rule breaker, a rock star, something that Jimmy Chamberlain would do, or something that Robert Plant would do, or something that Jimmy Page, I think Jimmy Chamberlain was the guy from Smashing Pumpkins. Something that Robert Plant would do, or Mick Jagger, or any of the older guys from the Mad Men era. They began selling the sexual revolution as something that everyone does. And the boomers were able to kind of walk the line a little bit until that one show, right? Until that one show that said, oh, well, guess what? We don't shame elite women for being sluts. So why should any woman feel shame for being sluts? Sex in the City. Sex in the City, this was a show about women in New York who slept around. Women in New York had been sleeping around in this capacity since forever, but majorly since the 70s. That was the first, that's where it became mainstream. That's where the default became essentially yes, right? And all sitcoms from the 90s that took place in New York always had a bunch of plot lines that were essentially about sleeping with a bunch of different people. Seinfeld had it. I don't know if Frasier had it. That was a little bit bougie, but it was the same kind of idea, right? People certainly weren't following traditional sexual norms. And it was always kind of a little behind the scenes, like, this is a little bit racy. And then Sex and the City came out. Sex and the City, and this is, I don't know if Zoomers understand this, Sex and the City was not consumed by women who lived in New York and had this lifestyle. It was consumed by women, the very people that Walt Bismarck says shouldn't be sluts. It was consumed by women who were middle class Gen X and boomers would sit around and want Sex in the City and talk themselves into divorcing their husbands. I mean, I literally saw this, and I don't know if I really want to blame all of the divorces that I saw on Sex in the City, but more than a few times in my life, I remember seeing these much older women kind of initiate divorces largely. I mean, they would talk about Sex in the City, and then a few years later, I'd hear they were getting divorced from their husband. And I couldn't help but put the two together. I mean, you've completely remodeled your understanding of what sex should mean for any woman. And this wasn't, again, these were not women in their 20s in New York. These were not glam models. These were standard suburban housewives who would watch this stuff and psyop themselves into believing that they were one of the cool people, that they were able to kind of do this, that they were able to live the life. But of course, the life only works if it's a small number of people doing it and it's private. Mass media destroys aristocracy. And so here we are in the mainstream media environment, enjoying people like delicious tacos and zero HP Lovecraft and kind of performative misogyny in a high level and maybe performative misandry if you're a fan of Radfem Hitler. And we're all here, or Valerie Solanas or Andrea Dworkin, right? Although a little less performative in those cases. And we're all expecting it not to trickle down. I'd like to think that. I'd like for there to be a place, an artistic place where this could be contained in some way. But the problem, finally, with the internet age is that virtually nothing of this can be contained. It always goes downhill. It always becomes sclerotic. It always becomes democratized. And it loses its aristocracy. And then you're dealing, the next day you're dealing with your 300-pound HR overseer who thinks that she's the combination of Carrie from Sex and the City and Valerie Solanas from the Scum Manifesto, and your life is hell. Or conversely, you're somebody, God forbid, you're a woman who ends up in a situation like Radfem Hitler, who whose husband thinks that the revolt against the modern world gives him license to be a complete psychopathic tyrant. That's the result of this. This is the result. All of the internet revolves around essentially taking something that was held exclusive and then publicizing it instantly and creating a huge wave of approval. But nothing healthy can come of these things. They're designed not to be. I mean, does that mean that we're going back to being a Puritan? I mean, I'm not so sure. I mean, but I want to go on because related and not completely off the beaten track was the reemergence of a bunch of figures that I remember from earlier. I mentioned this is obviously Richard Spencer, Richard Hanania, and then you probably don't recognize the third picture, but that's the Walt Bismarck avatar. These guys were all in the alt-right sphere in 2016, posting stuff on, I don't know, on VDare, I forget where the alt-right post, I think it was 4chan or something like that, right? Posting heavily sort of nationalistic stuff back then. And now that we're in the middle of a vibe shift and it's clear that progressivism has lost its cool, and there's a huge amount of people, a huge amount of very dissatisfied, very high time preference people, probably that have kind of midwit IQs, who are coming into this scene. Now suddenly there's kind of feels like there's this opportunity, and you see these people reemerge. And I'm kind of trying to piece this together. Every single one of these people has reemerged that I remember from being alt-right back in the day. These guys have all reemerged as some form of neocon, as some form of kind of like safe, edgy right-winger that's, that doesn't go in for identity politics, that thinks that they're elite, and that the most important thing is to delegate power to the most managerial competent people. So, Richard Hanania, we need endless mass migration. Richard Spencer, unironically vote for Joe Biden, more immigration, and throwing everyone under the bus, up to and including people like Peter Brimlow, who for decades was a person who blew the whistle on the demographic crisis and is now being taken to the cleaner by Letitia Jones in New York for essentially, that seemed completely frivolous charges, to essentially destroy their entire magazine, VDare. The magazine that essentially created the ideas that Richard Spencer himself took and tried to ride temporarily to fame, to great disaster of everyone who surrounded him in 2016. I talked, I think, briefly to Walt Bismarck just in the comments, and it's very apparent that these people believe that it's their role to kind of ride popularity waves. And I mean, if you want to, I guess, right? If you want, is this the role? I mean, we should probably go back in time. Oops. I mean, I'll put it this way. I mean, they believe, I'll probably get to that slide later. Control the slides. I'll go back in time. I mean, do people remember the alt-right? I mean, this was, I think, sort of the first example of I was really aware of something like this happening. I had seen it happen a few times before. Back in the day when I was still a libertarian, where I was still voting for Barack Obama, I loved reading edgy blogs. I even read old unqualified reservations, although I thought he was just kind of a kook like all the other people I read back in the day, like Eliezer Yudikowsky too, and all that stuff. And, I had seen previously that there are little flare-ups of right-wing sympathy when things like Katrina happened, or I think there was another one that came with the big immigration debacle right before the financial crisis during the Bush administration. And then there was another one around 2012 that seemed like little flare-ups, little things that caused people to be upset. And it seemed maybe like this brand of sort of paleoconservatism might break through. And I think what had happened is that we had not quite entered the online age yet. So, for instance, in Katrina, there were a number of incidences where essentially extreme racial violence was going on during the city being shut down. And the initial media just covered it straight up. They covered the violence as it was going on, and people were saying, oh, well, this is a way that we can, people didn't use red pill back in the day, but people were expecting there to be a huge resurgence of paleoconservatism in the wake of the anarchy calls by Katrina. Well, what happened was the mainstream media eventually got onto the scene and essentially controlled the narrative. The local media was thinking, it bleeds, it leads. Whereas the mainstream media thought, does it fit the narrative? And this is more or less the story. And the Great Awakening happens in 2012. Gamergate happens in 2014. And we have been in 2016, seemingly in a different world, seemingly with a social media that completely lets you do an end run around the narrative controlling features of the mainstream media. And this is where you get the emergence of the alt-right, the mass movement of the right. What happened? And of course, here I have the favorite artistic. I mean, I don't think the show was ever like super consistently funny, but this is from Murdoch, which was a kind of a political cartoon that was animated back in 2016 to 2017. And it had some very funny moments, despite being horrifically racist, which is part of its kind of performative charm, in the same way that the Scum Manifesto has a certain kind of charm to it, right? We're mature aristocrats, we can admit that, right? But this idea was that all of a sudden the rules don't apply anymore. There is going to be no narrative control from here on out. It's going to be pure discourse. It's going to be it's going to be just a wave of popularity riding ever upwards into eternity, and we're not going to have to deal with actually confronting this in any way. And of course, what happened was that they eventually ran into a brick wall in real life. They convinced themselves that they were invincible in the real world. They marched into Charlottesville thinking that they could meme their way through the narrative, and then just when they needed the meme magic to be there for them to catch them when they fell, it was suddenly not. It was suddenly not because popular opinion is incredibly transient. It's incredibly fickle. It does not have a permanent nature to it. It's here one moment, it's gone the next. It strikes like lightning and you get energy. The next moment, it's not there for you. There's no way to... sorry, guys. I'm not sure if I should click this or not. There's something going on in my live streaming. But I'm going to ignore this for now. Guys, if there's a problem with the live stream, just let me know, okay? I'm going to hope that this is not going to be a problem. Okay. Guys, give me a second to fix this, and I'll be right back. I really hate this. But I have to do this, otherwise the stream is going to end. Okay, yeah. Every now and again, YouTube just has to flash me a two-factor authentication, otherwise it'll kick me out. So I apologize for that. What was not really understood is that although the internet essentially allowed them temporarily to do an end run around the media narrative, at least until 2020, the alt-right was dead way before then because they didn't realize that popular opinion is fundamentally transient. It's fundamentally fickle. Nobody is, once you pull a bad optics move, all the people who are there because it's good feelings and because it feels like you're cool and you're winning online are going to instantly leave you in the dust. They're going to instantly throw you right under the bus. And now all of a sudden, the people who thought that they were invincible and could just meme their way past the narrative are suddenly facing jail time. This always happens. Who are they putting their trust into? They're putting their trust into internet donors against essentially the full power of the federal government. This cannot work. They were trying to essentially earn power, but they had no one to transfer the power to. You cannot meme deep power into existence. You can only meme transient power. This is one thing that, and I deeply respect Radfem Hitler and Alex Kashuta, but this is something that is somewhat of a psychological flaw of women, is that with some exceptions, when it comes to political ideology, their understanding of it is very much like the popular understanding. If it looks like a strong horse, if it looks like it's going somewhere, if it looks like it has a chance to catch power, they'll be with it. But if it looks like it's falling away, they suddenly won't. Now, there's obviously exceptions. Women are deeply loyal to their faith, and they're deeply loyal to their family. And in that way, women practice deep politics. But in the fundamental way, when it comes to ideologies, when it comes to political movements, when it comes to voting people, when it comes to standing with strangers, and not necessarily for a religious creed, it's about the vibes. And what's the problem with that? Well, the thing is that everyone defects at the same time. Nobody holds the line. So any kind of thing that spooks you starts a cascading effect, and suddenly everyone is gone. And you hear Walt Bismarck talk, and he's read several essays now. I kind of done with them, but you can kind of see the spirit of 2017. We're strong. I'm awesome. We're getting stronger. This is the strong horse that you want to be a part of. I mean, considering that he's kind of a 7-year-old phenomenon, he's hardly new. But that's always his selling point. Be with me to be strong because I'm strong. Yeah, but you can't sell strength on strength. Just like you can't sell money on money. Okay, invest in this stock because it always goes up. But the reason why it's going up is because you keep on investing in it. That's a Ponzi scheme. Stand with me because I'm strong, but I'm only strong because you stand with me. And the moment that you don't stand with me, I'm hightailing it and quitting all of my social media accounts because the only thing I believe in is strength. You're not strong by believing in strength. You're not rich by investing in money. Those are confidence tricks. They're complete self-referentials, and as soon as the first little thread goes, everyone instantly defects because the only reason why people are there is to win or to make money. And the second that's no longer a prospect, it's a cascade. It's why mercenary forces don't work. It's because people who don't believe in anything don't actually accomplish anything. It's why the organized minority who actually believes in the battles they're fighting for always wins against the disorganized majority. It's why female-based political movements on ideology never seem to work except create more entropy and more situations where we complain about our problems and don't come up with solutions. This is kind of the feeling I'm getting in 2024 is that people kind of want a repeat of this. Like here's something like discourse baiting. I mean, everybody knows that sort of the conservative movement is on its way out. Everybody can see that the old conservative movement of the Daily Wire is on its way down. And so I guess I have a picture of Joseph de Maistre here. And so what people do is they engage in discourse baiting. Discourse baiting is essentially what the new atheists did. Okay, so discourse, I probably should come up with a better term for this, right? But discourse baiting is something like, okay, so I know this thing is dying. I don't have any positive ideas, so I'm going to put myself forward as the negative idea to this thing. I'm going to put myself forward as the four horsemen of conservatism and just be the person who's known for deconstructing this idea. It's view from nowhere. So you'll have people going like, oh, well, can you prove to me that your ideology is true? Well, I mean, I can walk you through my ideology and why I believe it. I can compare it to your ideology and point to pieces of evidence that have led me to select my ideology over yours. But getting into a discourse with a pure negative position is stupid. The pure negative position always wins. But of course, since we're chasing that algorithm, since we're chasing the popular vibe, this is a popular way to kind of go out after popularity. Winning the algorithm. I mean, that was essentially what essentially Hassan and Vosh did for the last 2 years. We want to win the algorithm. We want to create as much controversy as possible and stay on top of it. Okay, great. But you don't control the algorithm. The algorithm is easily manipulatable. Maybe there's no one with their fingers on the algorithm keeping you off of it in 2017. But I'm not going to break my back making sure that you win the algorithm such that when you win the algorithm and get rich doing it by being a streamer or whatever, and I certainly don't get rich doing this, when you win the algorithm, then you'll do something good for me. Because the second you get power through the algorithm will shut you down. Not only that, the power you get from winning the algorithm is going to be transient popular power. A bunch of people who don't believe in anything, who are not committed to any larger ideology or larger brotherhood, immediately fading away the second a pin drops. The second things look like they're going down. They'll sell just as fast as they buy in. Oh, pandering. I've also heard this too. Like, people, I thought we understood how this worked. I've been through several conversations at this stage where people literally try to convince me, and this is coming from people like the Hanania people too, that identity politics are a good thing. The mass migration is a good thing, because if we play into these patterns, we'll win a larger percentage of the minority vote, or conversely, alternatively, I've heard this in one instance too, by demonstrating that we're not racist through minority outreach, we're going to put at ease the rich boomers that control the financial levers and the votes, and then we will win power by essentially lying about what we believe in and giving power to our enemies. Like, we're going to lie and then feed the lies with our own money so that we can be granted temporary electoral victory. Now look, I'm not a politician. I'm not in charge of any campaigns. I can't tell you how to spend your campaign dollars. But I can certainly tell you how I'm going to spend my time as not a pundit, but as someone who gives their opinion online. And that is not doing any pandering to groups that are not explicitly aligned or friends. I should say, I should have made that tighter. Aligned or allied. I'm not giving any effort to those groups. And I'm not pandering to identity politics of people who oppose me and essentially want to displace people who support my family's well-being. That will undermine any attempt long-term you have to maintain any kind of coherent coalition. The second you pander to your enemies in order to buy votes in the short term is the second that any kind of long-term coalition you have is going to crumble, because I've just told you that it's worth it more to be an enemy than to be a friend. And then of course, avant-garde edginess, or like being edgy, so that you can kind of grab attention from everyone and then steal the boomer bucks. You're going to be the next hot thing on the art scene. And look, I kind of like avant-garde art. I hope I spelled that correctly. I probably didn't. These slides are highly last minute, so bear with me, guys. I kind of like avant-garde art. I kind of like modern art. It's neat. I'm not a right-winger that hates all modern art. But especially when I see it from people like Richard Spencer and Walt Bismarck and these other kind of alt-right guys, I'm totally cool if you want to do something crazy and wacky and weird and fun as an art project. But I highly suspect that what you're hoping for is a huge mass movement of people who are going to come out and dox themselves and destroy their lives so that you can catch that wave of popular support to push you over the edge to some other project. And then what's going to happen? Where does that leave any of us? Where does that leave any of the people who support them? The people with families, the people who actually have some investment in the future, beyond trying to catch a popularity wave? Nowhere. It's like that thing from the movie Spinal Tap. Oh, they have this stage production where they're lowering Stonehenge from the ceiling. And the manager purchased a Stonehenge that was 12 times too small. He used inches instead of feet. And so when the Stonehenge comes down, it's like this miniature thing that the rock star's Spinal Tap almost step on. And then the manager's like, oh, well, it was a comedy act. It was a comedy act. And rightfully so, the rockers say, yeah. And at that point, it was not a very fun thing to be part of that comedy act. If I'm going to be part of some kind of edgy avant-garde project, I will be so as a consumer, not as a spectacle for a giant fiasco again. I think everyone's learned their lessons with that. The same thing's true for people like Richard Hanania. I mean, Richard Hanania, oh my God. I like him because he says things that are aligned to HBD, which is a long-standing scientific controversy that's broadly coded right because right-wingers are the only people who talk about it. And he says things that are mean about women and identifies a lot of the common problems in female type thought. Those two things. Okay, perfect. That's great. But in the meantime, his broader political strategy is to completely throw all right-wingers under the bus. To communicate in no uncertain terms how much he despises all people who adhere to traditional values and how he imminently wants to see them replaced by mass immigration or, failing that, AI. Okay, so like the hope is what? The hope is that you're our friend because you're making yourself the personal avatar of some edgy intellectual concept. Maybe we can rocket you to fame and you can be the next Steven Pinker. But that's never going to happen because there's no room in the Academy for another Steven Pinker. No one in the Academy will tolerate somebody who will promote this stuff, and therefore there will be no prestige or power. And furthermore, the second that you are able to wrest any amount of political power away from the establishment, they can yank that political power right away from you just by tweaking the algorithm and making it so that you're no longer avant-garde edgy, you're scary edgy. And then it's all gone. The whole thing's built on a foundation of sand. What's the long game? What's the long game to pandering? Nothing. Because pandering never gets you people who are actually loyal to you. That's what makes it pandering. If it wasn't pandering, it would be a patron-client relationship. What's the point of view from nowhere dialectic baiting? Nothing. Because view from nowhere dialectic baiting of the kind that goes on with internet pagans and internet atheists, no matter how right-wing they are, all it does is deconstruct belief. It does not actually create the belief necessary for loyalty. What's the problem with being an avant-garde act? What's the problem with just being the last honest guy who makes it through the Academy doors? Because it's all not real. And we seem to have forgotten a core lesson And I don't know how this seems to be a problem everywhere. There's a certain number of people like Richard Hanania who just hate right-wingers. And I kind of sympathize. I understand. I mean, maybe not Richard Hanania himself, but certainly when people get irritated at the right wing or think that it's uncool, and I'm not particularly cool. I'm kind of an aging nerd, intellectual type who probably should have been a school teacher, just mulling over ideas and trying to digest them as well as possible. But I understand when people say, okay, well, the right isn't cool. It's not cool to be right wing. And moreover, when you're listening to people who consume things like, I don't know, Glenn Beck or the Daily Wire, it's very noticeable that you're dealing with people who aren't holding the ideas at the same sophisticated level you are. I mean, for ages, this kept me out of religion. It kept most of my generation out of religion. Why did you not take God seriously? You didn't take God seriously because it was something that lower middle class people did. Was religion, was Christianity specifically. Now, if you were Buddhist, that was fine. If you were a shamanistic Shinto religion, that was fine. But Christianity, specifically evangelical Christianity, was the mark of the lower middle class midwit. No one wanted to be that. And even now, what through the great work of R.N. McIntyre and many others, a lot of the NRX ideas are slowly becoming more mainstream, which means that I encounter stupid versions of ideas that I know the sophisticated version of. I encounter stupid versions of the cathedral. I encounter stupid versions of the Schmittian friend-enemy distinction. I have not yet encountered stupid versions of Julius Evola, but I fully expect to. Well, that's not exactly true. I have met a lot of midwit pagans, and that's its own can of beans, certainly. But this is what lies. I mean, if you think it's worth it to do all of these things just to capture popular support and try to beat the algorithm and race to the top of a popularity contest, the rewards of victory in a popularity contest is that cringe and dumb people will repeat your slogans. That is your prize for winning a popularity contest. Without additional support, you will see cringe and dumb people repeat your slogans. Now, if you believe that so it's self-defeating. If you are just in this to be cool and popular, popularity is eternally self-defeating. It's eternally self-defeating because it's eternally running away from itself, just like fashion is eternally running away from itself. The rewards of winning a battle in fashion is to eventually see your fashion line sold at JCPenney's, in which circumstances it will no longer be fashionable. Fashion always runs away from itself. Popularity always runs away from itself because it is climbing up a caste system ladder, and people cannot be at the top of a caste system ladder. It's impossible. Not everybody can be at top, and the only reason why some things are seen as cool or not is because they're perceived as being high class or powerful. They're perceived as the strong horse, therefore people like them. They're perceived as the cool thing, therefore people like them. But as soon as they're not, they're gone. This is always the thing with pagans. What's the number one objection that pagans have to Christianity? I mean, it varies. I've known some sincere pagans. I know some men that I deeply respect who I don't even know if they're sincere pagans. I never been able to understand their faith, right? But I don't want to indict everybody. But what's their number? Zero HP Lovecraft, who's a writer I deeply respect, did this Nietzschean Christian synthesis article like a year ago. I didn't think it was particularly great, but it was interesting. But more interesting was his number one objection. And what's his number one objection? His number one objection to Christianity is that it's filled with weak men. Okay, fine. I mean, it's filled with people. I mean, not to put a too fine a point on it, it's filled with people who are like Rod Dreher. I mean, Rod Dreher, God love him. He is a good writer. He came up with a lot of concepts before anyone else. But he feels like a weak man. He acts like a weak man. And in any church in America, you'll encounter many other men like him that do not have the accomplished history of being an author behind them either. And so the big problem pagans have with Christianity is that it's filled with weak men. The problem is that this is a weak age. If you establish any church in real life that has any ability to operate, it will be filled with weak men. In order to be a true believer, you have to become, and I'm kind of stealing this from C.S. Lewis, you will know that you are a believer in the faith when you can comfortably share it with people who are absolutely cringe. Why would you want to spread an idea to everyone? Well, you want to spread the idea to them because you think it's true, because you think it will actually help them, because you think it's actually beautiful. And the thing about beauty that's not true about fashion, the thing about health that's not true about fashion, is that it's good no matter how many people have it. In the 1950s, people weren't obese. They just weren't. And I say that as somebody who started a diet yesterday. And, I have to skip all my post-live stream snacks that I'm not looking forward to, considering this is going to go on for a long time. Everyone now is obese. That was not, it's not like, oh, next year obesity will be in fashion. It's if everyone is obese, society is universally less beautiful. If everyone's healthy, society is universally more healthy. People cannot be universally more fashionable. That is impossible. People cannot be universally more cool. And people cannot be, people can be healthier. People can be stronger in an absolute sense, but people cannot be perceived as being the strong ones. There will always be a weaker half of your society. And so truly believing in a faith means that you're comfortable sharing it with the weakest people in your society, because you believe your faith actually brings with it a certain amount of strength. And to be quite honest, this is something that I have never seen in neo-paganism. I've never seen a neo-pagan say that I'd rather share faith with a weak pagan than with a strong Christian warrior. They always just pick strength. They always just pick the relative strength. I don't trust that. The rewards of victory mean that your ideas will be reprinted by cringe and dumb people. Yeah, and everyone will remember this scene. Do people? I don't know. This is one of the scenes that I'll always remember from The Simpsons. And not least because in the 90s when I saw it, it featured as a guest star my favorite alternative band, the Smashing Pumpkins. I think part of my quest to become a fan even now of shoegazer music from the 80s to the early 2000s. Well, the Smashing Pumpkins aren't shoegazer, but they steal influences from them. And so what happens? Bart and Lisa want to go to a rock concert. Homer is feeling like he's left out. And then he remembers back in his day when he's going to a rock concert. And I don't know what they're saying. They're saying Led Zeppelin, I guess, because of the poster in the background. And his dad comes in feeling confused. And he talks about what was popular in his day. And what's popular in Grandpa Simpson's day? Well, this is the 90s. So back then, Grandpa Simpson was the greatest generation. So it was some kind of like, I don't know, it was some kind of jazz from the 1940s, right? And then Homer says, well, get with it. And Grandpa Simpson says, well, I was with it, but then what was it? Changed. And he points to him and says, it'll happen to you. It'll happen to you. And then, of course, the boomer flash forwards to the 90s, and now he's the uncool one. And this was sort of the model of the boomer generation. But then I kind of did a double take even back then when I saw this, because I remember thinking of Pink Floyd. I mean, and you can, if you want to kill my video screen here, the things that Homer Simpson from the 70s likes that Grandpa Simpson doesn't get are Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. Yeah, I mean, maybe Homer Simpson doesn't understand the Smashing Pumpkins. I can't believe why not. Because certainly when I liked rock music, really not until the early 2000s, but, a little late, but better late than never. I certainly liked Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin just as much as the Smashing Pumpkins. Well, I mean, just as much as the Smashing Pumpkins. And I certainly had no idea of, Bugle Boy or the Chattanooga Choo Choo or Bill I mean, I did not yet know Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys would be another popular thing from the 1940s. The funny thing about this clip where Grandpa Simpson points to the boomer and says it'll happen to you is if you were in the right cohort of boomers, it didn't happen to you. If you were in Berkeley, California, and you were a progressive and you liked progressive metal, you could find yourself in the 1990s and all of the stuff that you liked would certainly not be current and on the radio, but it was still cool. It was still the thing. As a matter of fact, all the new stuff was just a variation on that old thing. There was no real break. As a matter of fact, some people kind of remarked when I was listening to Led Zeppelin, I'm like, why are people still listening to Led Zeppelin? That's 30 years old. Were people in the 1970s listening to jazz from the 1940s? Well, they certainly weren't. The problem with all of this is that there were a certain set of people that don't get uncool. And that's really if you're on the left, right? Which kind of brings us to why I hate doing this, you guys. I always have to mention BreadTube, of course, at least once, even in a conversation that's exclusively about the right wing, right? We have to mention them. But these were the winners of 2016. How were they the winners? How is BreadTube the winners? They were less funny. They were less engaging. They had none of the juice behind them. And all they did was copy people. First ContraPoints, then later Destiny. All they did was copy each other and make kind of paint by numbers videos, and then suddenly they won. Coolness should not be something that you can count on. The reason why suddenly, but we've gotten a bad signal. We've noticed something, which is that coolness is not permanent unless you have power and prestige supporting you. Blue America, the progressive America, essentially won the culture war. They took over and their beliefs became high-class beliefs. Progressives' beliefs were already high-class beliefs, even in 2016, even with nothing new to say. Of course they were going to win. Progressive ideas always win, but because progressive ideas are the nominated winning ideas by the government and the elite class that rules them. Therefore, they're never going to be completely out of date. They're never going to be embarrassing. They're never going to end your political life. And moreover, if you're a complete talentless hack, like PhilosophyTube, you can just paint by numbers, copy other people's philosophical ideas, their entire channel ideas, and then at the ripe age of something like 35, get cast to be in a Star Wars film, having virtually no other movie experience. When does that happen? They're designated winners. It reminds me of this article too, that another kind of edgy poster on our sphere, Catgirl Kulak. He's a guy who does these kind of like stream of consciousness nutso blog posts that I always read with enormous number, a large amount of salt, grains. I can't count the grains I would pour on a typical Catgirl Kulak article. Literally, the author's title just screams not to take me seriously. But he points out something that I know all too well, Okay, so here's a conundrum for you, right? If you were listening, evangelicals are uncool. Why are evangelicals uncool? Oh, ask the teenage or college version of me. The answer is really easy. Evangelicals are uncool because they're stupid. Okay, are they stupid? Are they really? I mean, do I think they're like the slack-jawed yokel from Deliverance? No, I don't think that. I never thought that evangelicals were backwoods inbred yokels. That's not even the stereotype. The evangelicals are only stupid insofar as they're not bright. They've got kind of kooky ideas that they don't properly examine. They're not properly educated. Okay, so then I go to Berkeley or I go to San Francisco, and I sit in one of their protests, like their teach-ins. This is back in my co-op years. Back in the Bush administration when it was cool to be left. I guess, it's still kind of cool to be left because you're always winning. And you hear a lineup of the absolute stupidest people you've ever seen. Of course, they're all like Native American activists and black activists, but none of them are cool. This isn't like some kind of hip hop performance where there's like this cathartic energy in the room, and the guy might not be book smart or might not have a high IQ, but man, he's flowing and you're feeling it, and you can just feel the masculine energy coming off him. These people are cringe people. They're overweight. They can't speak properly. They don't know their subject matter. They meander off point into conspiracy theories. They don't even come to a point, and they're very transparently not smart. Why do I think, even after I meet up with right-wingers from the Campus Crusade for Christ, or I guess it's called Crew now, why do I think that the progressives are smarter? Kakaro Kulak says, well, really, the craziest conspiracy theorists on the right, compared to their equivalent on the left, is way smarter. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. I don't like to compare intelligences, but no amount of stupidness on the left is ever stupid. And no amount of smart on the right is ever smart. If I were to compare two people from the place where I currently live, who I think I've ran into around town, but I never said hello to them, Robert P. George and Cornel West. They're both smart people, but if I was in a conversation with them, Robert P. George seems to me to be a lot more intelligent the way I would usually read it. The perception is almost the exact opposite, culturally speaking. It's kind of like stupid is not a thing that a leftist can be. A leftist can be uneducated. A leftist can be developmentally disabled, as our friend Uncle Yarv would say. They could be not intelligent. They could be extremely not intelligent. But they can't be stupid. Stupid is something that specifically is reserved for the caste that is represented by right-wingers. Stupid is something that the Kshatriya warrior class can be, or the Sudra working class can be. But Brahmins can't be stupid, and neither can Dalits. Dalits can't be stupid because they're not playing that game. They're playing their own game. They're not even in the caste system. They're outcasts, which is why Native American activists never even seem stupid, even if they kind of literally are. And sort of midwit 105 IQ evangelical pastors always seem stupid, even if they're literally quoting from Dante in the original Italian or reading from Paradise Lost. It's because stupid is a quality that is applied to certain castes in our society. It means that not only am I low intelligence, but I will play the fool in the game that I am playing. We don't use that word fool anymore, right? I think we should resurrect it, right? A fool is somebody who is essentially, I guess it's what the Yiddish would say is a schmuck. Well, in Yiddish, no one calls anyone schmuck. It's schlemiel and schlemazel is the Yiddish expression. If you're a highly Anglicanized Jew, you call them schmucks, even though schmuck is a very bad word in Yiddish. And if you know what it means, you know what it means, right? but it's a catch-all term for just people who are idiots, who get themselves into bad situations, who ruin things for themselves and for others, and it always look like the dumb person at the end of the day. I mean, think of every single character Larry David has ever played, which I guess is just himself as Larry David, right? That's the idea, right? And the thing is that the Republicans are Larry David. At the end of every single show that includes a Republican or an evangelical Christian, you could almost hear that little tuba at the end. Bum, bum, bum. Cue the klezmer music, right? Oh my God, the evangelicals have stepped on it again. They've completely screwed up. Oh my God, it's so embarrassing. And half of the Trump derangement syndrome that you have, it's just people making fun of failures of the right wing in a way that's kind of not the same way that the right wing does it. The right wing does it hoping that the stupidity will actually cost Democrats or the ruling progressive class some power. The left wing does it just to be entertained. It's just part of the pattern of life. These people always lose. And if you're on the progressive side, you will maybe not always win, but you will never be embarrassingly uncool. You will always be on the right side of things. And this kind of like, well, let's do a way back machine to last the whole concept of media literacy. And this is all BreadTube is talking about right now. And it is actually fascinating as a psychological profile to look at these people and talking about this, because it can't mean what people think it means. They seem to be saying that every piece of media has one interpretation, and that one interpretation is the way that is maximally politically flattering for my side of the culture war. And this is the correct way. This is the literate way to perceive media. The literate way to perceive media is to take all media and then just put it through a filter where the only good pieces of media are the ones that flatter me. That's almost the exact opposite of media literacy. I mean, well, do you do it too as a right winger? I don't think I do. I mean, here's a good example. I mean, let's look at a movie that I really did like, Mad Max Fury Road. Mad Max Fury Road is a feminist movie. The author is trying to communicate a feminist message, and all things considered, I think they do communicate that feminist message pretty damn well. It's a well-communicated feminist message. I don't agree with that message, but it's a well-made movie, and they communicate that message well. Thanks to media literacy, the concept, or I mean, essentially, I mean, they don't say this. The concept is that every single piece of media, if it's well-made, has a leftist message. And there's no explanation of even why that is. The explanation is, well, conservatives just are temperamentally incapable of making good art. And for the fact that they are being conservative, they cannot make good art. And in this case, I think this Big Joel was going over Team America World Police, and how all of the jokes that made at the expense of liberals were bad, and all the jokes that made at the expense of conservatives were good and hilarious, which is kind of transparently stupid. Most of the jokes I remember from that show are jokes about dumb celebrities, which mocks their progressivism, and jokes about Kim Jong-un, which, you know, are essentially ethnic jokes against a progressive protected class. Yeah, Big Joe. And I mean, is this eternal coolness, right? Being a progressive means never having to say you're sorry. Being a progressive means never having to be uncool, because you are always supported by power. And media literacy is just how the party likes reading things. Media literacy is the art of reading things the same way as our ruling class, such that if you misread something, you will always be able to fall back on, well, this is just the way the experts read it. This is just the way all the smart people read it. If you have the same reading as Noam Chomsky of a piece of literature as Noam Chomsky or Cornel West, it could be the dumbest opinion of all time, but by virtue of the fact that the previous smart people in society liked it, how dumb could you be for believing it? And it certainly won't set you up for any moment where you'll be the schlemiel of the joke, where the Curb Your Enthusiasm music will start playing on the background. But I mean, really, how, and this is kind of what's creating the vibe shift, how long can this really last? I don't think that much longer, right? The rewards of victory in a popularity contest is that cringe dumb people repeat your slogans. This is eventually catching up to the left. I mean, I don't know how long I can go on believing that this guy is cool. I mean, I'm looking pretty haggard right now. I probably aged a solid 3 years in the last 3 months based on a number of family things that are happening and sicknesses and stress. But damn, dude, this guy looks like the uncool, irritating, progressive guy that smoked pot at my high school. The dilating pupils, the fake sincerity, the half-truths that come slithering out of his mouth. This is not anything that I want to be a part of. It's something I want to be a part of if I think that I'm going to be on Team Win. The second that I'm not on Team Win, I do not want to know what this guy does, because he's going to head for the hills in the most brutal way since the collapse of the alt-right at Charlottesville. I want people that I can trust. I want ideas that I can trust. I'm pretty sure I'm not getting ideas that I can trust from people who look like our modern crop of progressives. Their entire reputation is banked on being on Team We Always Win. Eventually, it catches up. Eventually, the vibe shift happens. So in 2024, you've got a bunch of angry young people who are disillusioned with politics, who probably aren't even cognitively equipped or educationally equipped to deal with politics at a strong enough level, and who are looking for something. And I don't know what the solution to this is. If they go to the right, there'll be a cringe force on the right and drive people away. If they go to the left, they will exacerbate the continuing decline of the left as a cultural political force. The only solution and the only way out of it that I see is again through organizing an elite. There was another article. I hate to just be sort of the article review in this podcast. Another article called "The Postmortem on Neo-Reaction" by Spandrel, and he kind of overviews the problems with neo-reaction. Now, neo-reaction is a movement that I consider to be quite successful in that it essentially accomplished the core part of its mission. It essentially replaced libertarian political theory as the reigning political theory on the right, which I think was a very good development. It completely undermined the credibility of the mainstream right and aided, in some sense, mostly this was Trump, but aided in the decline and eventual death of the Republican Party. And more or less at core, I think it gave a more realistic picture of what actually goes on in political circles. The problem that Spandrel, famous, he's a blogger from the original right-wing sphere. What makes this article challenging, what the large problem is with the anorex or the dissident right is it doesn't have anything to do afterwards. I mean, what is there to do? I mean, once we've understood Machiavellian political theory, Schmittian Frenenian politics, and once we've acknowledged the sort of managerial trap that we're in and the reality of the total state, as R.N. McIntyre is very fond of reminding us, what's the next step for a dissident movement? Well, there's really nothing, because the whole idea of a dissident movement is it's supposed to teach you who is the best place to put your trust. Who is the best what is the best direction to go in? And it presupposes that there's a leader to follow. Okay, there's going to be a Caesar. Well, there's no Caesar right now. Oh, well, there's going to be an alternative elite. Well, there's no alternative elite yet. These things all have not yet been developed. And although we're looking for them and although we're waiting for them, there's something else that we can really do. Okay, what are the reigning ideas in the reaction? Okay, monarchism. There's no monarch. Populist right-wing political ideas, which we could broadly call sort of fascist or whatever, or nationalist. Well, the big problem there is that the demographics of almost all Western countries is imminently going to arrive at a point where playing that kind of nationalist game is either going to be impossible or create chaos more than it will create order. And it has a large probability of being turned back on you. Okay, well, technological elites. Well, there you have problems too, because our technological elites are not aligned with anything that is at all healthy for the rest of the race or themselves. And so, this is a very good article by the Post by Spandrel. It essentially says that, well, we're going to have to build something. And that's kind of where we find ourselves right now. The big problem with all of this is an issue of aristocracy. What everyone's reaching for in this in this whole the femoids reaction to the great femoid revolt of 2024, what's really being lamented is a sense of aristocracy. What Alex, I'm paraphrasing here, but what Alex Kashuta wants is a kind of contained misogyny that allows, or kind of contained right-wing spirit that allows men to be men and aggressive in their own way, but somehow shields women from the more corrosive aspects of this. And and she has every right to want this. And I think that's more or less what Radfem Hitler wants. That's more or less what Blonde and the Belly of the Beast wants. That's more or less what Helen Roy wants. And I'm trying to put words in people's mouths, but they want a certain amount of aristocracy to constrain the wild nature of real masculine politics that's kind of being unleashed by the vibe shift. The problem is that this development of aristocracy requires an element of privacy that just does not exist online. I cannot enforce what anons do. And moreover, there's no way to safely practice kind of edgy avant-garde language without it immediately catching on with men who have no sense of irony or no sense of humor and who are 20 IQ points too dumb to be doing this stuff and use it in hyper-aggressive ways. That's alarming to women. There's no way around building an aristocracy. But aristocracy has to be built on a foundation of deep politics. Deep politics versus fast politics. This is one of the reasons why, and I've said this many times, that I'm very focused on in real life building, is that I do not know how to obtain the level of trust and privacy that's required to really develop healthy political instincts and healthy political behavior. Someone once asked me, or a friend of the channel, Juniper Tree, posed a question, and I intend to use this question in multiple places and in future essays. What is the point of politics for people who do not do politics as their hobby? What is the point of politics for people who aren't running for office, who aren't looking for Caesar, or who don't do this as a side hustle like I do? Well, the point of politics is to develop a core set of instincts, a core set of loyalties that help you and your family navigate chaotic times where there's political instability. But this is only really useful at a deep level. Virtually everything else that goes on the surface of Twitter, while kind of entertaining and allowing me ample amount of material to repost off of for these live streams, which is very entertaining because I like getting angry, all of that is ephemera. All of that is not going to matter. And not only is it not going to matter, it's almost impossible to use unless your goal is just to sort of become the new ContraPoints and get politically savvy and then waste your life away and don't give a shit about the next generation. The kind of popularity that you get from momentary bursts on social media is useless. Not so much because it earns you money, and there is such thing as changing the Overton window. I do believe in that, despite the fact that the people at the Nomos guys mock it constantly. It is a thing, and it happens online. And certainly the vibe shift have made certain conversations that were impossible to have before this year possible now. And I don't want to underplay that. It's not really useful in the way that the question was posed by Juniper Tree. It does not help you develop the right instincts about who to trust. Deep politics is what you can't walk away from. It's the first lesson. Deep politics is what you can't walk away from. It's not following the strong horse for the strong horse's case. Deep politics is what you use strength for. It's the banner that you stand and defend regardless of what changes. This is the most important core of all political affiliations. And this is what's also so strange about the whole revolt of the women this month, is that you had women who were married, who were deeply religious, who had 5 kids, saying, I'm not trad because I'm not like the Instagram influencer who's pretending to be a Bavarian shepherdess and who's making cornflakes from scratch. And who's obviously just doing this as an act on Instagram and on TikTok. I mean, come on. I mean, let's put this in perspective. This is the pattern of everywhere on the internet is this same deal. The political label always goes towards the most popular, which is almost always the most fake. Insofar as trad has any meaning, the woman with a husband, 5 children, and a devout religious belief is trad. Instagram influencer in a dirndl in a studio kitchen is an actor. But we've completely inverted it. We've completely averted it. So the thing that we always talk about, the thing that is most important, is always the thing that is just happening now, the thing that people are putting on as a disguise, an element of the infinite mirrors. Deep politics is what you cannot walk away from. This is one element of the left that we need to respect, is that, and this is actually, I should say this both about the alt-right and the left, or the nationalists and the left, is that they do have elements of their politics they don't walk away from. Race, you cannot walk away from. I might think it's a little crude. I might think that it's insufficient to develop a civilization, but you can't walk away from it because your children are the same race as you are, and you can't possibly stop defending your own race. You can't change your race, and so you can't walk away from that. The identity politics of the alt-right were the most real thing about it. The will to power Nietzscheanism was the most fake thing. Oh yeah, I'm a white nationalist in 2017 because the anti-whiteness was really bad. And then I stopped being one from 2018 to 2020 because the anti-whiteness just wasn't bad enough. I mean, it's all bullshit. The loyalty to things that you can't walk away from when they become unpopular, that is your real deep politics. And even on the left, transgenderism, very hard to walk away from. Religious belief, more on the right, very hard to walk away from. We don't walk away from those things. And so they become our own deep politics. In many ways, the emergence of transgenderism on the left is the millennial left trying to develop their own deep politics, or white millennial leftists trying to develop their own deep political religious belief well after all of the religious pieties of the original left have become unbelievable as anything other than kind of a LARP and a grift to sell to people who are economically frustrated. Deep political power is just the set of things that you can trust. What can you trust? this is essentially where the Lindy rule comes into play. I'd like to think that of the political commenters in this sphere, and I don't like to compliment myself or toot my own horn, but I do like to think that I have a certain amount of consistency and honesty that people respect, which is why people are watching this right now. I don't think that I'm cool. I don't think that I'm happening right now, but I do think that the things that I'm saying, I truly believe in, that you can trust them insofar as I trust them myself. I don't do live streams unless I have something that I think that I can actually say that's useful. This is also why, and I say this continuously, and friends are valuable, enemies are expensive. The internet is entirely designed around beefs, around figuring out enemies that you can throw under the bus. But all that does is make you weaker continuously. I mean, okay, let's take my example. Rod Dreher and James Lindsay. These are two people that I pretty consistently beef with. Or Adam and Sitch, the centrists. God, I have political disagreements with these people. And I don't think I ever knew James Lindsay or Rod Dreher, although I certainly was a frequent commenter on his blog. And it certainly influenced me. And I bought all of his books. But now these people are, although I don't think they're really enemies, they're certainly more in the enemy camp than they were before this last year. Okay, but that means that I'm weaker. I mean, maybe I'm closer to the truth. Maybe I'm stronger in my convictions. But the fact that we are at loggerheads, the fact that somebody that would once done me a favor and that I could trust, I can no longer trust. Yeah, I can see that my video is in the way of trust. Things, instead of things that you can true. Yes, that is indeed trust. But that makes me weaker. The whole idea of a political group or coalition is to slowly learn what you can trust and what you can't. People will ask me, and I assure people well, does that mean we can't trust women? This whole thing, your whole first thing about Alex Kashuta and Radfem Hitler is that we went through essentially 2 weeks of drama to essentially learn that women were getting the ick, not for any substantive reason, but simply because weak men were being cringe, as weak men always are to women, right? And so the whole cycle of Twitter was completely a waste. Well, does that mean we can't trust women? Well, yeah, you can trust women. You can trust women because you understand women. You can trust women because you understand what women can't walk away from. Women can't walk away from their children. Women can't walk away from their faith. Women can't walk away from their homes. Well, I mean, that last one, you can walk away from it more. But that's their deep political instinct. And on those grounds, I will always trust Alex Kashuta. I kind of even like Radfem Hitler still a little bit. Great performance artist, not going to lie. Many such cases, right? Many such kooky, man-hating feminists that have given valuable contributions to the human race by making us think in weird ways and keeping us on our toes. But we can absolutely trust these people because we absolutely understand what their values are underneath it all. We understand what their beliefs are. And that is what's valuable in politics at the end of the day. Deep politics, lastly, is a matter of habit. And this is what eventually we get to the title of the stream. One thing I like to think that I have in this blog is a sense of constancy. And I'm not the only one who has constancy. I think that a lot of conservatives have a sense of constancy too, which means that even though I may change my opinion, I will never lurch. I will always be open about how my mind is changing and where my mind is going. And I'll always be true to the value commitments that I set out this project with. to begin with. I've always done politics with the understanding that the two main objectives were the survival and health of the human race and its communion with God. And pursuant to those values, I want to be constant in my approach so that you can trust me. So that you know the things that I can't walk away and the things that I'll defend and the things that I'll do. And moreover than that, and I know this is kind of ironic considering my rather sporadic podcast schedule. This is like, I certainly haven't been constant in my release of material on this blog. But I want to communicate a constant effort towards fostering community and networks of trust that we can use in the future. Deep politics is what is going to get us through this, because deep politics is the only thing that's going to last. And it's the only thing that the modern world can't really create. For all its AI technology and all of its control of the algorithm and all of its control over the current thing, it can't actually make people believe. It can't actually make people loyal. It can't actually give people a sense of fighting for anything other than dopamine hits. That's weak. That's fundamentally weak. And it's also completely schizophrenic. One day it says one thing, another day it says the exact opposite. Nobody can possibly believe this other than the kind of robot NPCs and grifters that work at mainstream outlets, or the people who are still hopelessly lost in a previous world, a previous kind of boomer world that no longer exists anymore. The way we're going to win this, and this is every time I hear this, the way we're going to win this is AI technology is going to level the playing field so that we'll be able to produce Hollywood-style movies with a shoestring budget. Well, the problem with that is that anything that AI can produce is by definition not going to distinguish you from anyone else. So what it does is it will give you potentially, I haven't seen it yet, high production values or good production values at the very moment that high production values will become universalizable and therefore not a distinguishing feature of a high piece of art. The way that any right-wing force is going to win this is through habit and through creating a better person. It's through the idea that we do the things we do because they're of our nature. We raise children. That's just what we do. We stay loyal to our faith. That's just what we do. We act morally. That's just what we do. We act politically to advance the things that we value. That's just what we do. The pattern of existence is what gives people their coherency. It's what gives them their collective identity. It's the seedbed on which broader things can actually grow. I think, this is the worst place to build it, the internet. Okay, great. But the internet's what we have. The internet's where we're starting. And, when I hear people like Alex Kashuda and Helen Roy and the rest of the women who kind of were giving the right wing a hard time in the last week, I see people who are building in real life. I'm certainly doing that. I'm certainly creating networks of trust. I think that is promising. I think there is something there that we can take. I think that there is a thread that we can pull. And once it starts coming, I'm really hoping that we'll be able to pass through these sort of waves of recrimination, that we'll be able to appreciate them as sort of the meaningless noise that they are. There's two ways that you can experience online misandry or online misogyny of the zero HP Lovecraft or Radfem Hitler variety. As kind of a kooky performance art, or as the mulings of a plebeian class of a generation that is quickly passing away. Either way are perfectly fine. But I think in this moment you have to determine what serves you and what serves your own political values that you want to defend with your life, and that we hope to bring forward into a new age that's much less confused than the one we live in. All right, guys, that's the end of the lecture, and I will go to Super Chats now. Okay, guys, by the way, while I have you, and I'm not going to do an intermission because I might take my jacket off. It's really hot. Apologize for the costume change. Okay. I will entreat everybody who is in the New York or New Jersey area to examine the Mid-Atlantic Weavers Banquet. There should be, and I'm going to double check this right now, there should be a link in the description, I believe. So we are running an event on April 20th. It's a small banquet, essentially in central New Jersey. It should be within driving distance if you're in the right place in New York or in Pennsylvania. And it'll be a nice evening with a dinner provided and with the events in the link. The events in the description. It'll be a dinner provided. I'll be there giving a short speech, and 3 other speakers will also be giving a short speech on community building. Formal wear is essentially we're asking for it, and it'll be a good time all around and a good place to essentially bring a girlfriend or a wife and meet the community. Perhaps it'll be a little bit smaller than our last one because I think the timing is a little bit off for a lot of people, but I'm expecting to have a lot of really good talks, and I encourage everybody who's in the area to click on the link and buy a ticket so that we can get our head count up for next week. Anyway, with that, I'll be going to the Super Chats, and I'll probably be doing some more shilling at the end of this. But, okay, great. Let's go back to the main screen. All right. A lot of Super Chats today. Okay, let's just go from the bottom here. So will Acolyte for $5 USA. Happy belated Easter, Dave. This year, our church was bursting with people during Easter, and our priest catered mass towards those who came as family or friends. Do you think secular America is sensing Mark Zero and seeking the divine? Well, I don't know. I mean, really, I probably could have done this on the whole Dawkins thing. I think the whole era of secularism is kind of waning. The problem is that most people in secular America are dyed believers in progressivism, which is more or less incompatible with any orthodox version of Christianity, small or orthodox version of Christianity. The Mark Zero, this is a reference to the novel No Fear from Warhammer 40k that I did a fun essay on last week. The Mark Zero is when our religious leaders realize what time it is, not when the hoi polloi realize that they're under assault by demonic forces and cry for aid. Mark Zero will be when somebody who's probably not our current pope in the Catholic Church realizes that placating secularism and pandering to those demographics is just not going to work. What I would expect to see is I would expect to see a lot more people trying to edge back into church, to try to come back gradually. So I'd expect to see more of that in the next few years. And then what's really needed, what's preventing sort of a broad scale religious movement is a lack of an elite leadership that can lead it. A lot of the very energetic young people just were not promoted in the right way or came to the faith too late. And a lot of the people who were encouraged to be priests and pastors are of a disposition that is decidedly quietistic, that does not like confrontation. because those are the people who were encouraged to pursue this. The real fire-breathing people, at least where I come from, are hard to come by. A lot of seekers, though. A lot of people who are tired of what progressivism has bequeathed them. So we'll acolyte for another $5. A friend of mine on the distant right has become obsessed with Israel-Gaza and dunking on progressives online. I think it's a waste of time and largely the wrong fight to focus on. What do we do with friends who we believe have gone astray? I don't know. I mean, what we're talking about right now is friends that are essentially, I mean, I don't know. I think Israel-Gaza is a waste of time. It's a fight that does not concern anyone in the West. It's a fight that you can only lose by participating in, since both sides of the conflict are fundamentally not our friends. Now, maybe at some later date, they could ally with interests that are broadly representing Christendom. But essentially, what both Israeli and Palestinian supporters always look for in Western allies is they want you to endorse their struggle and they will never endorse yours. I'm not playing that game anymore. I'm not investing in other people's wars until we can come up with a consolidated vision about what we have in common and what we're fighting for that is in common. And in order for me to be pro you, you need to be pro me. Just at a very baseline level. I would ask your friend in a very non-hostile way just why he's so invested in it. Aren't you more worried about people who are more like you? Aren't you more worried about the people who are dying in South Africa even? Or the people who are dying in Ukraine? I mean, I don't think we should be involved in the Ukraine war either, but I mean, at least that's somewhat closer, I suppose. Are you not worried about the imminent catastrophe that's lying above the places that we currently live? The drug and crime catastrophe that's going on in the United States. The continuing family decline, the growth in despair. The only really way to convince people is to ask questions, because questions are what allow people to reframe their problems in a more useful way. Dusty for $15 USA. Hey Dave, I recently came across your Fiddler's Green podcasts, and I'm really enjoying it. Thanks for your work. Well, thank you very much, Dusty. I appreciate it. And I always appreciate the support, but thank you for that brief super chat. Calvinist for $5 USA. Women talking to men is not right wing. Women talking to women is right wing. Poe the person is female coded and approved. Alex Kashuda is male coded and not approved. 1 Corinthians 14:34. Let your women keep silence in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak to men. Well, thank you for the Bible quote. Certainly legit. But I mean, Alex Kashuda has been one of the best influences on the right wing. I really do admire her work. I mean, she's not really a very prolific essayist, but the essays that she has released have been very good. They sort of narrow, laser focused on a particular issue, very much like a similar interviewer, Jay Burden. And in the meanwhile, she's opened up a huge avenue of contacts and conversations that are going on between communities that never talked to each other before at this point. And that is an invaluable service that she's played. And moreover, I don't know if she's fully become Christian yet, but she certainly is sympathetic. She's a wife and mother. I don't know. If you can't trust Alex, I don't know. I think you're getting a little bit paranoid, and she's not trying to lead a church congregation, certainly. So I'm not sure that the St. Paul quote necessarily applies to her. Poe the person, I don't think she's doing Women's Hour anymore. I think she's purely going back to video essays and art. I believe that was passed, the torch was passed to another content creator called Birdie, although I had to check with my wife about that one. But thank you very much, Calvinist. German Sacido for $10 USA. Hello, Dave. A few months ago, I sent a super chat asking for marriage advice, as I was getting married in November. Now my daughter will be born. Whoa. in August. Any parenting advice? I will be living in New York City. Well, I have one advice for you. Here's where I shill you for my event. For just $45 more, you can get a dinner and an event where you have multiple speakers, and I'll give you the advice in person. No. It's fine. Congratulations on your both your marriage and on the pending birth of your daughter. Okay, my kid advice. Well, the kid advice is the one that I really remember my father giving me was, don't worry, Dave. It's a lot of work, but it's not hard work. It's not challenging work. You have a lot of things to do, but it's usually all pretty straightforward. It's all very doable. And just give yourself permission to be sleep deprived for the first few months, because that's just going to be the reality of your existence, is to be sleep deprived for the first few months doing it. After that, it's going to be, well, I don't know if you're really talking about after that. I mean, look, you're going to be paranoid for the first few weeks of the kid's safety. I think that most parents' fears are, you're usually way too hypochondriac. So take down on that. Make sure that your wife has support. That is the number one thing. When my wife had her child, I actually deeply regret the time. I deeply regret the decision I made. So I got a very brief paternity leave and then went back to work, and she was going up to stay with her parents because she had to, because there was an immigration issue. So she traveled with a young child up to Canada. And when I wasn't there, she had like a huge crisis just with mental health and with support. And I wasn't there to support her. And I actually, in hindsight, I feel really bad about that I was not there to support her at a critical point in her postpartum. Your wife needs a lot of support. Make sure that she has that support, both from you and from relatives, if that's at all possible. In New York City, that's going to be really, really hard. But friends are really important, or any support that you can draw on. If you have any paternity leave, use it all. Your wife will thank you. Those first 2 months are critical to get through. I mean, partially because of the baby, partially because you're doing it for the first time, but mostly because you're trying to keep your wife from going into an emotional tailspin, which women absolutely will for their first 2 months, and they need a lot of support during that time. But that's my advice. Give yourself, don't panic. It's going to be a lot of work. Prepare for sleep deprivation. Get into habits of doing things automatically, like changing diapers. Once you turn that into a habit, you'll just do it automatically, and it won't be as traumatic if you have an aversion to doing that. And monitor your wife's. Yeah, if there's one thing that I would say that I messed up, it's that I over monitored the baby, and I under monitored my wife's emotional well-being. That was my one mistake, and I would try not to repeat that. Your wife will probably have better instincts than you about the child's well-being, but she'll need some gap to collect herself, especially if she's a little bit older. That's my best advice for that. Thank you. Bolero 393 for $3. Huge spring is ahead. Northeast USA basket weaving event in April. Old Glory conference in June. The Sylving event in August. So much brewing in the maligned and neglected provinces of the GAE in 2024. Yeah, I'm really hoping to make the April event a success. This is the first time where I've tried to organize it myself. It probably will be the last time, because I'm having to write a speech at the same time that I have to worry about the attendance. looked like there might have been a little bit of interruption there. So thank you very much, Bolera. Michael Latornu for $3. What are your thoughts on Dawkins wanting his theological cake and eating it too? I.e. Christian architecture and music without the genuine belief. I mean, this is just the stupidest thing I've ever heard, right? I mean, he wants to have a museum, but was the charm? I mean, I grew up liking James Herriot and Watership Down and J.R.R. Tolkien and the concept of the Shire, which I only ever saw for 1 year in early grade school, and the English countryside still stuck with me. I had an enormous amount of romance for that. But when you talk about the quaint British countryside or the wayside English church and the behaviors of the people there, it requires the people. It requires the belief. Without the belief in the people, it's hollow. What do you want, like a museum? Do you want to walk through the English village and have it be completely occupied by mannequins and animatronics? If Richard Dawkins had his Church of England and his English village, and it was just animatronic robots carrying out the daily tasks, if it was a Potemkin Greenwich village, is that what he wanted? A hollowed out skin suit? I mean, I guess that's what he asked for, right? He asked for the beating soul of Western civilization to be cut straight out of it. And now, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions. I mean, maybe if you're one of these, hard racialist types who believes that it's 100% just the genetics of the English that matters. But in that case, you'd be an outspoken opponent of the mass immigration that was coming into the country. It is of no surprise that old England died. You killed its religion and you replaced its people. And both are necessary for it to be the place that it once was. Both the faith of the fathers and also the fathers themselves. I might have to take a quick intermission. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Real family situation. I had to run off and take care of it. I'm back. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, I think that concludes my thoughts about Richard Dawkins. Good Lord, how could you not see this coming? I thought these people were relatively... I would kind of want to see how Christopher Hitchens reacted to this age that we're in. Everything is a creation of his own fault. Not him specifically, but people like him and their decisions. And now we're sitting in the middle of a secular progressive religious hysteria that has distinct Trotskyist elements, and a collapsing demography. I don't know. I'm just shaking my head at these people at this stage. I mean, but it's not Dawkins. It's the entire boomer generation. It's the entire vibe these people give off. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they don't see it. I don't know how they don't see it. Bolero393 for $3. Retardation forbidden at the Fiddler's Green. I like developmentally disabled. I think your idea is developmentally disabled. Retardation. Oh, is that because I called RFH a tart? I don't know what the bird is. Bird better? Maybe I can call her a bird. But there needs to be always some kind of dame. I mean, there needs to be a slang word for women when you're really frustrated with them who aren't your wives. And I was really frustrated with Radfem Hitler because I was just waiting for that to come. When's the other foot going to come on this Radfem stuff, right? Hey guys, let's not be nice. Let's not be mean to people. Let's not be hypocrites. Let's cool it with the misogyny. Oh, what do you recommend? Oh, wow, the Scum Manifesto. The Scum Manifesto. Good thing we don't have rape caravans. Gray Smog for $3 USA. I recently watched Whites Only Ads Extremist Adventure. A British Nigerian journalist goes to Irania and clumsily tries to get Iranians to denounce Irania and their right to exist as people. Who's Ade? So this person literally went to Irania and tried to kind of like white guilt them. Like, why are you trying to defend yourselves against an insane crime rate in the government that constantly says it wants to murder you and considers it their right to say, as elected officials, that they might murder you on a whim? Why are you running away from that? Gee, let me check. Is this? I think this would be comedy gold. Is this woman like an awful? If she's an African, then it wouldn't be very funny because it would essentially be an African woman who does not understand how people from non-African countries think, where talking about imminently exterminating people tends to get people upset. But if this is some kind of white awful, South African white awful, that would be a hilarious documentary. There was this documentary that was very popular in Berkeley when I was in college about the attempt to essentially exonerate this group of black men who had murdered a South African peace activist towards the end of apartheid, after apartheid was finished. And the whole family kind of forgave these guys for brutally raping and murdering their daughter. And even back then, I'm like, are we sure about this, guys? And they're like, oh, no. This is part of the truth and reconciliation process. The parents are just so forgiving that they forgive these guys for brutally torturing and murdering their daughter. And I mean, how do you know these guys are sincere? I mean, and even if they weren't sincere, isn't there some act of contrition that has to be experienced before straight up murderers of women can just go free? I couldn't expect that. I wouldn't expect that if my son had murdered and tortured a woman. I would expect him to. I mean, I would expect him to experience some consequence for that, not just to go scot-free and have this be part of some kind of, Saturday morning special message about how racism is bad and how great is it that we forgave these murderers. It felt wrong. But now the follow-up is, well, why don't you allow yourselves to get murdered for the greater racial harmony? No one, I don't know. Who's buying this? Creeper Weirdo for $10 USA. A fun thing happened to me in the pop review sphere. A channel called Hello Future Me went full cringe left and talked about how the right doesn't have media literacy and lives in a bubble. The lack of self-awareness was amazing. You think it was 2014. It was on the real reason rings of power suck. Well, okay. I mean, I don't know what's the. I guess everyone now acknowledges that Rings of Power is terrible, and now there's a media literate version of why this intellectual property that was totally antithetical to Tolkien's vision is terrible. It's media literate because it minimizes the damage. I mean, the core reason why, the reason why Rings of Power sucked is the same reason why The Hobbit was bad, and the same reason why the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings was not as good as people say it was. The Lord of the Rings, the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings was a fine movie, a good movie, maybe the last even really good media franchise, but it also fundamentally did not capture the feeling of mysticism that was found in Tolkien's books. And that's present in many other movies that are fantasy. I just saw with my nephews The Last Unicorn, which very much in The Last Unicorn, it's a 1980s cartoon which actually also features Christopher Lee as an evil king, and it's a very imperfect movie. The animation's wonderful. The music is a little cringe. It was written by America, which is one of these these 80s soft rock bands that, and the voice actors have some musical numbers that they cannot pull off. But it captures it captures a genuine medieval feeling to it, and it captures some of the feeling that was in the original Lord of the Rings. And Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings really does not have that feeling, and it's slowly drained out to the point where in the Rings of Power, that the feeling is not there, because if that feeling was there, it would trigger more introspection in its core audience than they would really want. Why couldn't you have a rapturous, romantic, operatic, male-female romance in a movie? Like you have with Luthien and Beren and Luthien. That's the one from the Silmarillion, right? Silmarillion. Yeah, that's Silmarils is the crystals, right? Why couldn't you have one of those epics like Tristan and Isolde? And that was one of Tolkien's great loves. But if you put Tristan and Isolde in a modern Netflix movie and gave it, as the script demands, very attractive heterosexual parts, that will offend part of the modern audience. They don't even if they're not white, even if it's like a ravishingly hot, I don't know, Med woman or Armenian woman, right? Let's take my favorite punching bag as the eternal Armenians. If a really hot Armenian woman and a really handsome Russian guy or whatever, like even if you did something like that, it would still trigger in the modern progressive audience introspection that is entirely unwelcome. There are certain elements that have to be minimized or included ironically in all movies. Heterosexual romance always has to be downplayed and watered down and treated with a note of irony in order to be placed properly in a progressive movie. And that's why all modern movies just kind of feel weak and irrelevant. I mean, Godzilla -1 had kind of a powerful. It was a Japanese movie, obviously, because we can't have this here. It had a powerful heterosexual. It wasn't even like a heterosexual romance. It was kind of like a patchwork family of the kind the left says it likes. But because it was so wholesome and so nuclear, it coded super right wing. to the point where I would have been amazed if I had seen that in a modern American movie. Now maybe with the vibe shift afoot, the modern Hollywood will make movies like that, and it might even hit with a movie like that. But it has a very hard time doing it, at least currently. And it would be very hard for them to relearn this technology. Batman Bad for $3. What's the likelihood of a pro-life movement surviving, and where do you see it going in the future? I mean, I don't think the pro-life movement... Look, hey, the pro-life movement has to become a post-sexual revolution movement. We are done with the sexual revolution. That has to be the pro-life movement. I mean, okay, I guess there's two ways to take this. The pro-life movement has to become, we don't want the medical establishment murdering people, e.g. MAID / other bioethics concerns, and I hate that word bioethics, and an abortion as a package deal, as part of medical abuse. It has to become that, and it also has to become a blanket, we're done with the sexual revolution. Now, again, I don't think we should be peering in people's windows or, shaming people for redeeming themselves after a career at OnlyFans. I think that this has to be the purview of these people's private existences and their pastors. I do not want to be the morality police for women in these positions, even though I think they do need people guiding them. But we do have to come to an understanding that the proper way to do things is in the pre-sexual revolution mode, where all relationships build towards the creation of a family. And to the extent that the relationship is not building towards the creation of a family, it's kind of not good. It's kind of gross. It's kind of immature. I won't do outright immoral because I don't think we're ready for that yet. And even though I do believe that it's immoral, I'm not expecting that to come about currently. But I do expect relationships to be treated as pre-marriages. And if they're not pretty obviously pre-marriages, to be treated as something that you really shouldn't be talking about publicly, that you should be kind of getting over as quickly as possible, please. And that are kind of a low status thing. I mean, public strictly extramarital affairs are highly low status. Anybody who's powerful and ubermensch enough keeps it private, and anybody who is who is middle class just doesn't do it. Only low class people do it and have it visible. And that should be sort of the rule going forward. I do not want to hear about people's extramarital affairs. I don't. I want to hear about their family formation. I want to hear about their engagements. I want to hear about their children. I want to hear about them setting people up on a course to get married. I want to hear about family creation. That's what the pro-life movement has to be. And its role as kind of like, let's do civil rights, but for the unborn, that's a dead end. That already has been accomplished through the Supreme Court. And I mean, you're not going to use political pressure to get women to not have abortions. You're going to have to use social pressure to accomplish that. And you're going to have to use social pressure by showing them a better way, e.g. a higher status way, and also showing that the way they are currently on is, to borrow women's favorite derogatory phrase, a little bit creepy. Anyway, to go on. Nerve AMV maker for $20 USA. When McManus said he was unaware that the primary support of the Nazi Party came from anti-Bolshevists, it revealed that he had never read even a mainstream book on World War II. Literally any World War II book, and Barnes & Noble will tell you this. A scholar of the radical right never read a single World War II history book. Or, he probably has read World War II history books, but he probably just disregarded where they said this because he wasn't reading it critically. The only thing he read critically to inform him about the narrative were essentially Howard Zinn's history. Right? And this is what the problem is, and I understand this about myself too. Like, we don't view history as a completely unideological thing. We view it as a place with certain slots, right? So there is, in my worldview, the saints have a large role in history, right? So maybe I think that Catherine of Siena. Okay, Catherine of Siena is somebody who was a political actor in reconciling the Catholic Church during a time of crisis. That's one thing that she's known for if you go see her Wikipedia entry. So if I read a hagiography of her, and it makes it sound like she was the person who, was the seminal piece in healing this wound that was going on, the division in the papacy at her time, then I'm very likely to believe that. If I read 3 other histories that tell me that she was a minor figure who was peripheral and who mainly had a spiritual capacity in encouraging it in the people, but the main actors just disregarded her, that's less likely to stick in my memory, right? The problem with McManus's mission is that he's trying to understand the right wing from an ideological position that demands he not understand it at all. Every single one of his tweets, and what I find so entertaining about him, his tweets always imply something that is not strictly speaking true about the right wing. He always implies that right-wingers have no legitimate ideology in history. It's all just ressentiment. It's all just bitterness. It's all just knee-jerk reaction. Matt knows this is not true. Matt has read the scholars of the right-wing tradition. They're just as old as the ones from the left-wing tradition. Carlyle and Karl Marx are near contemporaries. I think Carlyle's a little bit older, right? Machiavelli is no less material than any of the socialists. Thomas Hobbes is a common ancestor for both right-wing and left-wing traditions. These are, by any objective measures, just 2 rival political traditions. But the communication to his intellectual audience is, this is what the right wing says. To his popular audience, it's always with the side order of, and there's no legitimate reason to believe any of this. It has no basis in history. It's totally illegitimate and concocted out of pure ressentiment, right? Pure resentment of real ideology. It's all copied. I mean, and Matt doesn't know this. So his ideology and his position forces him to kind of not learn things properly. And I think that creates a huge problem for him and a problem for all of this scholarship that just makes it ridiculous. I mean, you can't, when you make an error this big, right? It's, I mean, I had grandparents that fought in this war on the Axis side. They didn't care about Jews. They cared about the giant Soviet menace that that was about to and eventually did ethnically cleanse all of them out of their homes. That's what they were worried about, and that's why they fought. And but no, we misremember the most important element of right-wing history as a person who studies right-wing history. Takar for $3 USA. I went back to some of your earlier videos, and it's amazing how intelligently you analyze the times. I have learned and continue to learn a lot. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I like to think that my videos have a lot of staying power. This is one thing about me. I was much less successful than ContraPoints, but I'm damned I never deleted a video because I disagreed with what was said in it. There's 1 or 2 videos I deleted because I believe that they were very, very low quality and I didn't edit them right. But I stand, and even the ones where I'm like, for instance, early on, I was a big believer in the whole John Paul II can make liberalism and based Catholicism work. Like, Catholicism has got the patch to make liberalism work. And I don't believe that anymore. I still believe Catholicism is true. I still believe that it's the key for man's communion with God. But it cannot fix an institution unless everyone just became Catholic tomorrow as an act of God. Unless something like that happened, it cannot just magically right a ship that's this far out of whack, saving some miracle from the Almighty. But it's important for those videos to be up because I think that that's a record of how my thought patterns changed over the years. And it's important for sort of my own constancy and form to keep that up. I would like to make more videos, but it's just a matter of finding time. No, it's not a matter of it's a matter of making them worth it. And I need to find a subject that I really want to have be a video and not just an essay that I read or like this, where I just have a vague thing I want to talk about. Batman Bad for $3 USA. Hey Dave, how are you today? I'm very jet lagged and very tired. Maybe that came across in this live stream because I certainly felt like it was a little bit more, I was a little bit more detached than I usually am. Creeper Weirdo for $3 USA. Dave, aren't you afraid of the scary young men? They might want movies without girl bosses and video games with pretty women in them. Isn't that scary? Well, okay, I mean, look, guys, women have every right to be afraid of men. Men are the violent part of the human race. And human beings are very dangerous animals. Women have every right and justification to be afraid of uncontrolled young men. And as we all know, Helen Roy and Alex Kashuta are very much not on Team Girl Boss. As a matter of fact, that was kind of Helen Roy's thing for the most part. The thing that I think is a little bit silly about the great femoid revolt of 2024 was just how it was completely unactionable. I can't stop an army of Andrew Tate fans or just Pearly fans from reply guying you. These men aren't in my parish. I can't give them a talking to. The closest thing I can reach out to other content creators and talk about their performative misogyny, but A, it's no worse than Radfem Hitler's performative misandry, and B, Alex has interviewed them and has, in many previous instances, professed to be a fan of their work, performative misogyny and all. So these objections are completely unactionable from I mean, it's just like fix the internet or fix the man crisis. I can't fix the man crisis until I can give these men an economic outlet with some in some situation that does not make them look like complete fools or complete cucks for working when other people can receive much more praise from playing video games all day and posting on social media. We can't fix the male crisis without those things. Takara for $3 USA. From a Machiavellian perspective, is the ruling class right not to fear mass migration? From a Machiavellian sense, it's much, I mean, in a Machiavellian sense, in the short term, immigration stabilizes their power structure. Immigration makes it impossible for not impossible. It makes it very, very difficult for there to be an organized counter-elite to displace them. Why are cities useful? Cities are useful, and the reason why progressives are so much more organized is they've got a bunch of intelligent people who live in very, very close proximity to each other. So they can build tight bonds, even if they're total wrecks otherwise. Why are universities useful? Because you've got a bunch of smart people who are all interdependent on each other. With immigration and urban sprawl, by definition, the demographic groups that are opposing the elites are more geographically divided and are less able to organize. And are more ethnically divided too. I mean, it's very hard for me to organize with Asian Americans who have similar grievances. If you're an Asian American communist and you hate Bay Area progressives, it's a lot harder for me to organize with you as a Central European Catholic, right? It's just harder. Our ideology is way further apart. Our cultural background is way further apart. And it's a mess. So in the short term, it helps them. In the long term, it hurts them. But I don't think our current leaders care. I don't think our current ruling class cares about the long term. I think that they are planning to just become gods or something. I don't think that will happen, but for whatever reason, either because they're going to die and they don't care about what happens after they die, or because they think that they'll never die and become gods among us, they do not care about the future. So the fact that immigration destabilizes the country doesn't register on their decision-making process because of their myopia. Batman Bad for $3 USA. You made a comment the other day saying that promiscuous women shaming is low class. Can you expand on this? Yeah, okay, so here's the deal, guys. It's low class because men aren't supposed to do it. Men are supposed to discourage women from being promiscuous. Two ways. First, by setting their preference for non-promiscuous women. That's fine. Stating your own, I do not like promiscuous women. You know, I want a woman with a low body count. And, you know, I have one. I should add. The stating preferences and then creating rules and enforcing them. What comes off as low class is threats that you can't enforce. There's nothing more low class than threatening somebody in a way that you cannot carry through on. And this is the thing that always marks people from sort of like lower ruling class areas. They cathartically lash out at you and you're like, you can't do shit. You have no ability to enforce this on me, nor will you carry it out. So there's first a reason. So first of all, men are supposed to state their preferences, create rules, and enforce rules. They're not supposed to like vaguely shame people with whisper campaigns. I mean, that arguably that is part of the enforcement process against promiscuous women, but that's typically done by other women. Now, that's part of the transition that we went through as millennials, is that in all previous generations before millennials, women discouraged other women from being promiscuous. Now, almost no women do that, either because they're too bashful or because they think that it betrays the sisterhood. Shaming other women for being promiscuous does not diminish the power of the womanhood. Promiscuous women diminish the power of the sisterhood. If women were more sexually continent, the power of women overall to influence politics in a positive way would be increased, because it would mean that they would have strong men that they were with and that they would be in a coalition that had to be listened to and they could actually get things done. But yeah, the main reason it's low class is you're complaining and you're making threats and you can't enforce those threats, which is a standard low class behavior. Dakar for $3 USA. Despite a massive oil wealth and sympathetic media, why do none of the African countries try to get an international lawfare movement going to get reparations from the Middle Eastern countries? Oh, because the Middle Eastern countries wouldn't pay them. In order for there to be a lawfare concern, there would have to be a coalition inside the Middle Eastern countries that really wanted to give a bunch of, and this is a misnomer, but this is a Demastrian point. Okay, so laws as they're written don't actually do anything. Their laws exist to represent a belief of the population. If the law exists, so let's say there's some technicality in Saudi Arabian law that says that the king of Saudi Arabia is technically online for all of the crimes done by any of the members of the House of Saud going back for thousands of years. And sure enough, they had African slaves. And that law is active law in Saudi Arabia. There cannot be lawfare because there is no belief in Saudi Arabia that the king is liable to pay back money to Africans that were enslaved 100 years ago. Like, there's no belief. And a law without belief is a dead law. I'm going to say this again. Law without belief is a dead law. The reason why people say, oh, we don't have freedom of speech in Britain. Well, actually, there are plenty of free speech laws in Britain that are written on paper. But the problem is that in Britain, everyone believes that the laws that are written to protect free speech are 100% subordinate to the will of Parliament and to the unelected British government. Whereas in America, there is the belief that the First Amendment has divine significance and that its expression, again, through its interpreters at the Supreme Court, has 100% power or sovereignty to overrule any act of government that could come in conflict with it. It's that belief that provides the right to freedom of speech, not the words on the paper. And the same thing is true in the Middle Eastern countries. Middle Easterners do not believe that they are in any way liable to African slaves that their ancestors took. And Americans, by and large, do believe that they're liable, that they're culpable for crimes committed against Africans by their ancestors. And that's probably one of the reasons why this shaming campaign for Irania was so unsuccessful. Nobody in Irania thinks that they have a responsibility to desecuritize their sort of mini sub-state because there's a hysterical white woman at the door hyperventilating into a paper bag over the fact that it's essentially an Afrikaner ethnic nationalist sub-state. Asteroidal Assassin for $3 USA. I don't know. It's hard to be a misogynist when the average woman hates men. It's hard not to be a misogynist when the average woman hates men and sees men as a disgusting horde. Decorum is good, but not being angry is long-housed advice. Well, women don't... I mean, I'm sorry about this, but like... Women don't see men as... Women will never positively perceive men in general. This will never happen. And if there were some kind of race of women that was like, I really love men generally, I highly suspect that would be an evolutionary dead end for that particular branch. That gene would get eliminated from the gene pool very, very quickly, because that woman would get taken advantage of. And, maybe she'd get taken advantage of in a way that would give her children, but she'd get taken advantage of in a way that would make her children have low survival probabilities, ultimately. Women are right to suspect men generally because men are a huge risk vector for them. And so naturally, they want protection. The problem is I can't protect nobody can short of, like, I know how to do this. Like, the way I make the label, so like, let's say I make a new political label, Terpaxy. The way I make Terpaxy safe for women is by making it super unpopular and by ensuring that no people who are not super, esoteric and in high theoretics will ever use it for themselves, and therefore kind of the riffraff will stay out. But the only way that we can keep sort of cringe people from doing this stuff is to be not popular and not visible on social media. As for anger, I mean, why would you direct your anger at women? Women aren't responsible for women generally. I mean, women are our government is responsible for where we are right now. Our educational institutions are responsible for where we are right now. The ideology of the last 100 years is responsible for where we are right now. It's the people who are actively advancing that should be the proper object of your anger, not women. Women are agreeable. Women are going with this because they see it as the strong horse, not because they're necessarily so enamored of its substance. I mean, this whole situation is horrible for women. Anyway, I hope that answers your question. I'm going to go on because I'm very late here. If OnlyFans chicks want forgiveness, Asteroidal Assassin again. If OnlyFans chicks want forgiveness, they can get married to a simp and move on. Why should we have to forgive them when they should be taking it up with God? Well, this is a fair criticism. I mean, it's not really for us to forgive them. It's not our job to. It's that is between them and God. And there is a case that forgiveness is fine, yes, but let's get this out of the public eye. And part of there were many cases throughout history where prostitutes redeemed themselves either by becoming nuns or by becoming wives. And this has been an element of Western civilization or Christian civilization for a very long time. But the pattern usually is that after redemption, you leave the public eye and retreat from it to become kind of, this one OnlyFans girl with the red hair who did this. Time will tell us exactly how sincere this is. But it would be better for her to kind of become less of a public figure, kind of for the rest of her life, hopefully. I can't imagine why she would be a necessary public figure for us to talk about in the future, unless she has a relapse. But there you go, Asteroidal Assassin. Asteroidal Assassin for $10. Why should we even convince or cooperate with the female collective? They don't have any honor and were never the drivers of political change. But they get more based in marriage, they say. They don't want marriage unless you are rich or extremely handsome. Women are either get on or get out. Again, I think this is the same problem, Asteroidal Assassin. We shouldn't be negotiating with women as a collective. I guess in some sense you can't. This is the whole problem with this whole thing, is that all the women got angry and they all get angry at the same time, which on social media is really, really, really powerful. If this were men, all of their anger would happen at different times. But because of how women's minds work and how other parts of their body work, there's sort of this weird sympathetic alignment, so that when one of them is upset, they all become upset at the same time and they all oscillate at the same frequency. And so then they all hit this moment at the exact same time, and it creates a huge problem. So you end up arguing with them as a collective no matter what you do. The framework of men versus women is very destructive for the right. It's not a frame that we should be accepting. That being said, if there was a way to minimize the damage that this has, then I would be happy to follow those rules. And sort of the lack of actionable rules is what makes this so difficult, I think. All right, Sam153. Cheers, Dave. 2024 is turning out to be lame so far compared to what was predicted. Could be the eye of the storm, though. Yeah, I guess so. I don't think anything's really going to happen until November, to be quite honest. I don't think anything can happen until November. Everything is going to get delayed until the last possible moment, and then in November, it's all just going to come unfurled really, really quickly. Short of another pandemic. What are they going to do? I don't think another pandemic will fly. Augustine Bonhoeffer for $15 USA. Hi, Dave. Longtime lurker here. Paying my union dues. Thanks for work and for your instrumental role in my Catholic conversion. Oh, well, thank you very much. God be praised. What role can poached, overproductive elites play in our circles, such that they can meaningfully contribute while carving out a life for themselves? Well, any poached elite is immediately useful because it opens doors and it brings us into a broader conversation. So, I'm trying to think of a good example here, but, part of this, the neoconservative cycle where you poach the people who are disillusioned and then they're the new right. The logic isn't wrong. The poached elites are the most valuable for you in the short term. The problem is when they direct the right wing back towards the center, because the left does not poach elites in the same way from the right. I mean, they do in a certain sense, right? The left absolutely poaches evangelical kids from their families. And a lot of their elite is ex-evangelicals who have a chip on their shoulder from, not being allowed to participate in all the fun. I don't know why you'd really want to have an early 20s the way that most blue staters do. They tend to be very miserable experiences for the most part. A lot of drama and not very much fun at all. But thanks to social media, people are bitter at missing out. And so the poached elite of the evangelical world is a useful tool. But they don't get to set the agenda. Right? The person who made the ex-evangelical that made the witch trials of J.K. Rowling doesn't get to modify the left's opinions about J.K. Rowling. She is still their enemy. But she is a useful person in the moment. And the role has to be kind of the same. The role for the poached elites has to be, you're here to facilitate the good of a right-wing community and not to essentially manage our journey to the left in a way that makes you feel comfortable. And the only way that this can occur is through deep politics. And I think one of the reasons what made the conservative movement so deeply corruptible by the neoconservative process is that there was something really deep about their principles. I mean, they had ideas, right? They had theories, but theories aren't deep politics because people always revise their theories. They had platitudes like rights and America and individualism and 1776, but those were platitudes. Again, that's superficial. The core stuff they had was faith, family, peoplehood, and that's it. But the problem is that none of those were sort of coherently part of the ideology. It wasn't like, okay, well, conservatism is for the good of the Christian people or the good of Christendom, or conservatism is for the good of the ethnic American people, defined by people who have ancestors going back to, I don't know, the end of the Civil War or whatever, right? Which would certainly not include me. And so all of these ideas that they actually did defend were all linguistic constructions that were based on legal fictions that were easily modifiable. So because they could never define what their deep politics was, they naturally got corrupted by the elites that they poached, so to speak. But that's my answer to that question. Creeper Weirdo for $3 USA. Philosophy Tube. Man, look at all that woke getting put away. It's practically gone. Soon we'll return to zombie Fresh Prince. Yeah, I mean, they are kind of putting the woke away a little bit. It's just not really going to work. I mean, after November, all of the woke people are going to be right back to their usual shenanigans. They're trying to put this back because they're feeling insecure on election season. There are no believers in moderation in that have any power in the moderate Democrat or the moderate progressive sphere. In the progressive sphere. But thank you. Michael Latourneau for $3 USA. Do you think Ayaan Hirsi Ali's conversion was genuine? Also, since we currently live in a culture of distrust now, how would we know a true conversion in this day and age? Well, I don't know, man. How could you ever know whether a conversion is genuine? I mean, was Anne Rice's conversion genuine? I thought it was. And then she, apostatized, 3 years later. The sense that I get when I look at Ayaan Hirsi Ali is a deeply confused woman who is struggling with a desire to be spiritual, a desire to find catharsis, but at the same time fleeing from a traditional culture that she rightfully feels has done her wrong. Maybe not in such a dissimilar way to Andrea Dworkin. And and because she was so aligned with the conservative movement, naturally Christianity is the thing to reach for. But we can't know how genuine these conversions are. I mean, I don't know. I think that my own conversion was kind of wishy-washy for the first year. I was largely kind of a revulsion of new atheism and then a desire to return to something more solid. But I wasn't really like, until I got a community that I really liked. Oh man, it was very hard. It was very hard for me to follow it in a serious way and in a committed way. I don't know if we really can just go. I think that if you know a person in real life and have a heart-to-heart talk with them, you can gauge the strength of their conversion. Gauging strengths of conversions of people that you haven't met is, you're never going to get to the bottom of that barrel, Michael. But thank you very much. Ben Fleming for $3 USA. Here's why evangelicals are destined to be forever uncool. Evangelical is synonymous with miscellaneous. In American Christianity, it's simply impossible for a miscellaneous category to be cool. Well, I mean, that's a huge problem the evangelicals have, is they're too generalized. They're built to appeal to everybody, and if you appeal to everybody, then no deep roots can be put down that are at all part of the ideology themselves. Jews and Catholics have a very hard time moving away from their religion. Evangelicals drop it at the drop of a hat, and they're notorious apostatizers. Notorious. And unlike Muslims and Jews and Catholics and Orthodox, they don't feel any affection for the tradition because they do not understand that it has any substance beyond kind of the platitudes that people put across. Holy cow. Someone gave me $100 super chat. 2 of them. Oh shit. Good Lord. Thank you, Tyler Willie Millis. This is amazing. Thank you so much. Glad you're back to streaming, Dave. Listening while waiting for power to come back after some storms. Well, thanks very much, Tyler Willie Millis. I wish I could give you more for that super chat. That's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed the show. I will hopefully do more streams. And hey guys, if you want to help out our in real life organizing and you're in the New York, New Jersey area, think about using that link below to purchase a ticket. And I'll see you all on April 20th for a nice dinner and a live 15-minute talk with a few other people who are doing short talks. Ben White for $3 USA. Hi, Dave. I'll have to catch up this stream later. I got a new commission-only sales job. I know it's high risk, but high reward if I succeed. I hope you and the family have a happy Easter. Well, Ben White, I'm glad to hear that you're doing well for yourself, even with a high-risk job. Might not be the thing for you always, but it's good for the short term if you can make it work. So good luck on that one. Charlie Maki for $50 USA. Thank you for the stream and articles. Do you have any suggestions for casual fiction? I appreciate the classics, but sometimes I want something for entertainment. Well wishes for your banquets from the South. Casual fiction. I mean, dude, I have 3 books that I'm reading now. One is a Warhammer 40,000 book. One is Roberto Bolaño's 2666 for the second time. And then the third one is the Silmarillion. And I guess maybe a fourth one would be eternally the Spengler book, which I'm always in the middle of. I really kind of do it. I split it up usually between really stupid stuff like Conan the Barbarian and Warhammer books, and then things that I think are more substantive, like the Bolaño book and the Machiavelli and stuff like that. Perhaps for a middle ground book that I think you might like. I thought that my go-to is like the Book of the New Sun. That's usually a popular one. I mean, with book recommendations, I always need to know what your general preferences are. It's like, give me a random book. Well, I have no idea what you like, right? Man. I mean, what did I used to like before I read? Like, as a guy these days, it always feels like if you're reading, it better be something important or something that's super fun that you're having a good time with on every page. And it's hard for me to think of a middle ground between the two of those things at this stage in my life. I felt like I had a lot of middle brow books that I liked back in the day. I mean, a book would be like, oh, read Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth, but I hate books like that, right? I hope those suggestions help. Or you could always just read some Paul B. Schlock, right? Anything by anything Conan the Barbarian or Solomon Kane or that stuff is always really good. Anyway, Sam153, the Masters tournament is this weekend. I always find it wholesome spring sporting event celebrating excellence. Am I wrong on this? The Masters tournament. What is the Masters tournament? Let me see which. Is that golf? I think it's golf, right? Yeah, it's golf. Okay. Well, I hate to say that I know nothing about golf. I played golf once in a business setting, and I really sucked at it. And I've never looked back. If it comes to like snooty country club sports, tennis has always been my go-to thing. And you know, I like watching tennis as much as the next person. So I can't imagine why it wouldn't be good. I think all sports are really wholesome. Sports are very wholesome. I mean, even watching sports isn't as bad as people make it out to be. It's a little bit 20th century and kind of cringe in that way. And God knows all of like the major sporting teams at like the NFL, NBA level are horribly corrupt. But it's not a cringe. It's a fine pastime. So yeah, I think that's nothing wrong with that at all. Gray Smog for $3 USA. Ade is a wheelchaired man, not a woman. Okay, he was a pretty bad interviewer, to be honest. He wouldn't let anyone share their thoughts because he was too busy asking them if they would date a black person. This sounds like a shitlib. I mean, who cares? I mean, I wouldn't date a blonde person. I don't know. I mean, like, I've never been a very big blonde person who liked blonde. I don't like blondes. Am I an anti-blonde racist now? I mean, good Lord. This is just a modern progressive thing. Like, if you have preferences in how people look, with how you're sexually attracted to them, then you're Adolf Hitler. I such petty shit all the time. Nerve AMV Maker. I read a work called The Myth of American Individualism. It makes it crystal clear that liberty is the founding era was liberty of communities to strictly govern themselves, not individual liberty to do whatever you want. Well, yes, absolutely. That was called license. Reminded me of that idiot you debated saying that heroin was peak freedom. Oh yeah, I debated a bread tuber or some kind of Vosh clone who he after an hour like debating me, he said that we had to let people do heroin and we couldn't take the heroin away because that was individualism. And I said, then fuck individualism. And he banned me because that was too aggressive. So, yeah, this idea that like freedom means we let people kill themselves using drugs is kind of crazy. No one in history would have ever believed that. And that was, obviously it was before the superpowered drugs, but no one believed that punishment for vice was something that would make you unfree. It was strictly in this idea that you had the right to govern yourselves in an ordered way. And everything depends on ordered liberty. Ordered is, it really should be, we really shouldn't say ordered liberty because that makes it sound like liberty is good and ordered liberty is the best kind of liberty. It really should be something like non-tyrannical order or order without tyranny. Order is the operative thing that we're procuring. Liberty is the cherry on top that makes it better than it would be otherwise. But there's no such thing as chaotic liberty. There's no such thing as chaotic liberty. Chaotic liberty is tyranny. Chaotic liberty is tyranny of force by whoever has the ability to wield it against you. And if not by a human source, then chaotic liberty in a spiritual sense is spiritual oppression. Creeper Weirdo for $3. Is there a way for you to go? Is there a way for you to go bad? The idea of negative flanderization. Oh, to go back to the idea of negative flanderization. It sounded very interesting and the closest thing of examining a based take on lefty art. Well, I mean, like you can if you deflanderized, I mean that would be interesting, right? Well, I mean, I kind of proposed that there's an essay I wrote, the original one on Matt McManus, about a year ago, and I proposed like one of my favorite after reading the Harry Potter series. I thought that you probably could do a really good deflanderization of House Slytherin and of the Malfoy family. I mean, like, tell their side of the story, like make it sympathetic. And furthermore, make it super sympathetic by showing that the result of this liberal Hogwarts, all the Muggles come all the Muggles get to see the magical stuff. How that totally backfires and destroys the entire endeavor. That would be that would be a negative flanderization of those characters, and at this stage, Rowling might even sign off on it. Anyway, yeah, I'm highly anticipating Rowling coming back. I mean, we should very much interpret all progressive art as having secret reactionary messages. That is a very good strategy to take. Generally, it's strong. It allows you sort of total control over the narrative, and it basically forces progressives into this schoolmarming position of enforcing how you interpret a work that should, in most cases, have an element of leeway in the interpretation. I mean, it's kind of like doing the Sam and Frodo are gay thing back at the left, right? Now nobody can watch Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings without thinking like homoeroticism going on in the background, even though that was definitively not what Tolkien was intending. But you can read it that way, and because you can read it that way and every progressive constantly reminds you of it, that ends up kind of like occurring to you in the back of your head. And then when you see things in real life that are like that, it occurs to you in the back of your head. If you do that with left-wing art, it creates the same process going on. And if the story you're telling is more beautiful or better, in the way that Sam and Frodo certainly is not a better story, Sam and Frodo being gay is certainly not a better story, then your story will slowly supplant their story. And we tell better stories. Owen Zaleski for $3 USA. Hello, Dave. I hope you are well. I'm frustrated with the AI slop on the right. I'm not so uptight about stealing stuff, but I wish more right-wing creators would consider commissioning right-wing artists. God bless. Yeah, we've commissioned art from both Juniper Tree and Poe the Person. And we've both been happy with it and encourage other people to do the same. Look, guys, AI art is never going to distinguish you in any way. It's even if it gets really good, it's still always going to be what everyone else has. It will always be average. There will never be extraordinary AI art because anything the AI can do, another AI can do slightly differently. There will always be 1,000 AI portraits exactly like the AI portrait that you just produced. There will never be a one-of-a-kind AI art. Anyway, last super chat of the day, a very generous one from Lucius Sula for $100. Love your work, man. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the stream, guys. I'm going to read Psalm 13, I guess, and thank you very much to Lucius Sula here. That's very, very generous, and definitely incentivizes me to do these more often. But like I said before, these streams are based on my time slots, not on my the finances they generate. But thank you guys very much for joining me for Fiddler's Green podcast number 48. That's just what we do. This is Psalm 13. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts, and day after day have some sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God, give me light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I have overcome thee, and my forces will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. I hope you have a good evening and a blessed rest of the week. Happy Easter to all.